Chapter 754. Perhaps Chinong had been reading this text for a long time, and it attracted the attention of the goblin guards at the door. These goblins looked a bit like the goblins and goblins commonly seen in the Western fantasy world. Their light green skin and short stature, as well as their greedy nature for wealth, all reminded people of this fantasy race. But the goblins in Harry Potter's world were a different kind of creature. They were not even considered intelligent life forms, but a kind of magical creature. They were as common as the rats in the Muggle world, and often appeared in the back gardens of wizards. They looked like bearded dwarves, but they were annoying creatures with low intelligence. The twins of the Weasley family often experimented on goblins. In Chun-Ang's eyes, they had a trace of the elegance of people of his generation. Chun-Ong brushed away the spell at the entrance of Gringotts and walked through the silver door. Inside was a tall marble hall. About 100 or so goblins sat on a row of high stools behind a long counter. The layout was like a 17th century bank. Those goblins didn't even raise their heads when they saw Chinong walk in. They focused on their work. Some of them used scales to check the weight and quality of gold coins. Some used eyepieces to check gems, and some recorded accounts. The value of gold coins was very high. 1 gold coin was about £5, and the contract was 50 RMB. Moreover, gold coins were not pure gold. Even in 1990, £5 could not be exchanged for 2 grams of gold. If gold coins were pure gold, there would be an absurd result. The value of gold coins was even higher than its value. Even if the financial system of the goblins was rough and backward, they would not be so stupid. For Chinong, although pounds were like paper, he could have as much as he wanted. However, Gringotts Bank also had restrictions on large exchange. Therefore, Chinong only exchanged 2,000 gold coins in total, which was barely enough for his expenses. The prices in the world of magic were not high. In Lihan Bookstore, Chinong picked up some teaching materials and books, as well as some old books at a low price. It only cost him a few hundred gold coins. Chinong flipped through the books and found that, just as he had expected, in the books of the Magi, even in the books about the core spells and spells of the magic system, the knowledge related to magic was extremely incomplete and obscure. The arcana system that Chinong learned was complete, logical, and rational. Even the magic system for mages that was reorganized after the fall of the ancient arcana civilization was much more brilliant than the spell books that were full of chaos, ambiguity, and lack of a system. Most of the magic books in this world were really just spell books. They only taught you how to wave a wand and cast a spell. There were detailed explanations on how to hold a wand and how to pronounce an incantation. However, there were very few explanations on the nature of the incantation. Some of the descriptions were vague and weird, like the inarticulate ravings of a crazy old witch. This was closer to the image of most of the magi that Chinong had seen. What made Lucian confused was whether these magic books that looked clear but were actually a mess of internal logic had educated the wizards in the world of magic like this, or whether these wizards could only write magic books like this. In the extremely rare alchemy books and potion books written by Dumbledore and Nico Lemaire, Chinong did find some knowledge related to the nature of magic. However, these things were not the understanding of the whole world, the universe and the planes, nor the analysis of the laws of energy and the laws of the world, nor was it a rational language full of mathematical formulas. Instead, it was a set of things operated by empirical technology and mystical philosophy. It used a lot of symbols and visions, described in emotional, vague language, and based on personal experience. It looked like something useful, but in fact, it was a hybrid product of the set of rules and philosophy and symbolism in the medieval alchemy books. It could not be said that they did not have exquisite and in-depth research, but it was full of idealism, emotional, and personal feelings, rather than scientific, rational, and based on a set of orderly research rules. Chinong commented, "The research of the wizards in the world of magic is a hybrid of Western mystical idealism and Eastern empirical technology. They don't study mathematics. Chin Ong closed the magic book and sighed. What else can they study? No wonder Dumbledore won the Merlin Medal. It was because he discovered 12 new applications of dragon blood. The wizards in the world of magic are a group of people who rely on experience and intuition to master the application of their magic instincts. They don't have science, and they don't even have rationality. Most wizards don't even know how to do the 4 operations. They don't learn either. Their learning is to imitate and wave their wands, imitate the pronunciation of incantations, and then practice again and again to become proficient. Their potions are constantly fumbling according to vague medicinal properties and a set of potion formulas summed up by luck and experience. It's 70% like China's ancient medicine. But even worse than ancient medicine is that from the beginning, Chinese medicine has a dialectic, and they don't even have the dialectic of yin and yang. They're more like the witch doctors of Wei and Chu. In essence, that group of wizards is no different from chimpanzees who can learn to use tools. The only difference is that chimpanzees use their natural hands and constantly try to summarize the experience of using tools, while wizards rely on their natural magic power and constantly try to use the experience of magic power and finally summarize the current magic system. They have skills but can't use them. Like a craftsman, they can occasionally invent some new things because of their rich experience and even extremely delicate inventions, but they don't understand the unseen world at all, the laws of nature at work behind the scenes. However, not only did Chin Ang's doubts not solve, but there were also many untested conjectures. There was a certain element of chance in an individual's personality and behavior, but if the sample was expanded to a group, even if it was due to the cultural factors of the group, it would eventually lead to inevitability. For example, the wizards of the magical world and the muggles of the normal world. 2 groups that were physically close at hand and had no objective obstacles in the exchange of information actually became 2 groups that were almost completely cut off from each other in reality. This was simply impossible and unscientific. In theory, as long as a wizard wanted to understand the muggles, they could easily obtain a large amount of information about the muggles and reap great benefits from it. When they knew that their magic could bring them a large amount of gold coins, they could take control of the muggles' large enterprises, and the auras, who were only a few hundred strong, could not stop them in time. It was completely inconceivable for such an extraordinary world to be separated from the mortal world. If this was just an individual, there would be many chance factors that restrained them from participating in the interests of the muggles' world. But if this sample was expanded to a group of thousands of people, there was no chance at all. It was simply inevitable that there would be such a person who tried to come into contact with the muggles. And the wizards who were deeply involved in the muggles' world would have a great impact on the sorcerer's world. Then the sorcerer's world should not be like this today. At least the fairies of Gringotts would improve their financial system with great enthusiasm. But they did not. So Chin Ong had a reasonable conjecture. Perhaps wizards can't understand rational, objective science at all. Just like dyslexia, wizards are a group that collectively suffers from rational understanding disorder. They are born with magic and can use magic. Does this deprive them of the ability to understand science? This is very magical. This needs to be tested experimentally to see if wizards can't understand science and its spirit. Are they unable to learn mathematics, unable to understand the whole set of internal logic of science? Do they have an understanding disorder? If that's the case, Chin Ong smiled and said, then everything can be explained clearly. The wizard's bloodline or magic deprives them of some of their ability to understand, causing them to have a cognitive distortion of the muggles that science has penetrated into all aspects of life. While their natural magic gives them magical powers, it also makes them mentally handicapped, causing the 2 groups of wizards and muggles to be so completely separated. They live in isolation in order to protect themselves. Chapter 755. Under the strange gaze of the manager of Lihan Bookstore, Chin Ong piled up the books he wanted to buy into a big pile. The pile was about half the height of Chin Ang's waist. Not only was there the Hogwarts textbook, standard spells, but there was also the book 100 Spells to Help You Manage Your Home, which was usually read by housewives. Of course, Chin Ong would not tell him that it was easier to decipher the essence of magic if the effects were the same and repeated. Chin Ong used the umbrella to point at the struggling monsters' Book of Monsters. The book that was trying to bite something immediately went limp. The eyes on the cover that mimicked the eight-eyed spider suddenly lost their light, and the whole book seemed to be dead. The manager watched in surprise as Chin Ong opened the empty glass cover and put the invisible book of invisibility under his armpit. He then went to the shelf next to him and took a book called Forgotten Ancient Spells and Spells. The books that were enchanted with strange spells were either useless under Chen Ang's hands, or the spells were simply broken. Just before Chin Ong paid the bill, the manager calculated for a while and calculated the price of the books. "Sir, the total is 1,380 gold coins and 23 silver coins." When Chin Ong took out his wallet, the manager asked him with embarrassment, "Sir, I have a presumptuous request. Those enchanted books brought us a lot of trouble. I saw that you subdued them very easily, especially the Monsters' Book of Monsters. Very few people buy this book, and the bookstore only has one copy. It is very tenacious. What spell did you use to subdue it? If you are willing to tell us, we are willing to waive the change for you." "Subdue?" Chin Ong raised his head and replied with interest, "No, I didn't subdue it. I killed it. This is a spell that can destroy the artificial intelligence of magical items. In the hands of some of the more dangerous dark magi, it can also be used to destroy a person's consciousness." At this point, the manager's face was already turning purple. Chin Ong continued, "That's right, it's the Soul Snatch Curse." The manager's face turned pale. His forehead began to sweat, and his whole body trembled. "Your bookstore only has one monster book? Then you should get more stock, because it's going to be a big seller soon." Although there was still a year until Hagrid became a professor for the protection of magical creatures, it was already a relatively short period for the spending power of magic. That was why Chin Ong wasn't lying when he said that it would be soon. However, the manager was no longer in the mood to listen to what he said. His whole body was trembling, almost begging, wanting to send Chin Ong away. Chin Ong didn't seem to understand his hint and continued to comment. "The enchantment on the Monster Book of Monsters is completely due to the author's bad taste and weird interests. It can be seen that he is a wizard who appreciates fierce and magical animals, so he added a fierce transformation spell to his book. Other than attracting wizards who have the same weird taste as him, such as Hagrid, it will only bring trouble to the readers. That's why I destroyed it without any hesitation. Other spell books that have been enchanted are different. The invisibility spell on the Invisibility Book of Invisibility is actually a vivid demonstration of the contents of the book. There are 28 invisibility spells on different pages, which vividly demonstrates the evolution of invisibility from ancient times to the present and the origin of each variant. It can be said that it is necessary. The only problem is that the wizard who can break the invisibility spell on the Invisibility Book of Invisibility must have a deep understanding of invisibility. This creates an interesting contradiction. Those who can read this book have already learned the invisibility spell, and those who can't understand it at all. The manager awkwardly wiped the sweat on his forehead and bent down to help Chin Ong pack the book. "There's no need." Chin Ong faintly refused. He gently waved the umbrella in his hand that was used as a cane, and the spell book under it was transformed into a blue floral cloth that was big enough to cover the pile of books. The blue cloth automatically wrapped the books up, and the corners of the cloth flew up and made a beautiful knot. Then the big bag that was half the height of a person shrunk to the size of Chin Ang's palm, and was put into his arms by Chin Ong's traceless stretch spell. The bookstore manager clenched his fist again. There was no doubt that this was Chin Ong trampling on the law made by the Ministry of Magic without batting an eyelid. Previously, he cast the unforgivable spell. Although it was a variant of the spell used on magic items, it still broke the law. The only difference was that he would be sent to Azkaban or fined. The Traceless Stretch spell was a high-level spell, but it was strictly controlled because of the possibility of abuse. In theory, 100 wizards who were proficient in this spell could squeeze into a small toilet cubicle, and the possibility of violating the International Wizard confidentiality law was obvious. Therefore, the Ministry of Magic set a strict rule for the spell. The Traceless Stretch spell could not be used for personal use, but could only be used for the production of specific items that were approved by the relevant Ministry of Magic, such as school luggage and family tents. But what could the bookstore manager do to Chenong, who could modify the unforgivable spell and was undoubtedly a master of dark magic? Knowing that he was just an ordinary wizard, the manager did not have the slightest intention of reporting Chenong. In order to uphold the law of the Ministry of Magic, he would offend the most terrifying master of dark magic? He was not that crazy. The world of magic had never been a place full of fairness and justice. On the contrary, although wizards and muggles lived in almost two separate worlds, they still had a lot of common experience in bureaucratic incompetence. For a long time, the Ministry of Magic had been a dog raised by the large pure-blood sorcerer families. Due to the rise of the Muggle bloodline sorcerers and the impact of the small pure-blood sorcerer families, the interests and status of the large pure-blood sorcerer families could not be suppressed. So much so that they turned to support trash, like Voldemort, to clean up the Muggle bloodline sorcerers who were fighting with them for power in the magic world. But because the person they supported was so incompetent, they were liquidated and their power was greatly reduced. However, the pure-blooded magi still had a deep-rooted influence. With special privileges and the power of the gold coins, they protected the dark magi and allowed them to move freely under the watchful eyes of the Ministry of Magic. Although they were no longer as unbridled as they were in the past, the tradition still continued. Wasn't the car parked on a side street of Diagon Alley in an open and above-board manner? Chapter 756. After leaving the bookstore, Chenong visited a magic potion material store called Slager and Giggs Pharmacy. As soon as he entered the door, he smelled the stench of rotten eggs mixed with decomposing biological tissues. Chenong had no choice but to cast an air freshener spell on himself. This was a life spell that he had just learned. Chenong imitated it with arcane magic, and it looked pretty good. Glancing at the wooden barrels piled up on the ground, Lucian saw toad livers, eel eyes, bat feces, and other viscous things in them. The cabinets on the wall were filled with glass bottles filled with various powders and herbs. There were also dried animal tissues, claws, feathers, and poisonous fangs. There were also some dark tissues of unknown animals. They looked like balls of grease that were strung together on a dirty rope. The whole scene looked a bit like the witchcraft material market in Africa. Chenong should be glad that there were not skulls of men and women, organs of Muggle children, withered human hands, rotten brains, and other necromancy materials. However, Chenong knew that there must be such things in Knockout Alley. Perhaps this was the reason why the Ministry of Magic allowed it to exist. After all, although a lot of black magic was theoretically illegal, it was almost an open practice for wizards to practice it secretly. Wizards who did not learn such magic were going against the tradition of wizards. Most wizards were like the Texans in America, loyal supporters of gun rights. Every pure-blood family viewed the black magic passed down in their family as their lifeblood. Of course, the shame of the pure-blood, Weasley, was an exception, although the materials here were complete. What Chenong wanted to buy the most was live magical animals, not tissues, organs, and specimens. There was nothing here. Living magical animals could probably only be bought in pet shops and the black market. As for whether to buy some from a pet shop, Chenong felt that it would be better to go to the black market. What Chenong wanted the most were magical animals that could be dissected and studied, full of vitality and fresh magic power, and were always active. He did not want these withered, rotten, and lifeless magic materials. However, he still bought some. He was going to repeat the potion experiments and use the same formula to research something. Although the magic books in Lihan Bookstore were comprehensive, some books about black magic and ancient magic forbidden by the Ministry of Magic were not sold at all. They were either handwritten copies or early editions published before the Ministry of Magic's relevant laws were perfected. Now they were all in the study rooms of the major pure-blood families and the forbidden books area of Hogwarts. Among the potion formulas, although there were books related to the blessing potion and compound potion, there were no clear formulas. Other common potion formulas were clear, but there was no systematic pharmacological analysis and dialectics. It seemed that the only way for wizards to study potions was to try and discover something by relying on their experience. After Chen Ong came out of the pharmacy, his originally bulging wallet had dried up. The gold coins he exchanged was a little lacking for his huge shopping plan, but Chen Ong did not plan to exchange anymore. The two most important materials, books and potion materials, were already in place. He did not plan to buy the outdated equipment in the magic world, such as crucibles. He did not need folding, enchanted, or automatic stirring equipment. Biochemical modulation equipment and related scientific instruments were what he wanted. As for Ollivander's wand shop, although Chen Ong did need a wand, he was more willing to make one himself. He wanted to combine the wand-making knowledge of this world with the relevant arcane knowledge of Phelan. For an existence like Chen Ong, Ollivander's wand was too shallow. If he tried, he would find that every wand was suitable, but not all seemed suitable. Chen Ong did not need a wand to adapt to him. He could control any magic item, so he only needed to make a suitable wand himself. Now, Chen Ong only needed to find a place to stay. He returned to the central part of Diagon Alley where Gringotts was located. There was a dark alley there, leading to the famous gathering place of dark magic materials, Knockout Alley. Although people had always compared Knockout Alley and Diagon Alley, as though they were two streets that could stand side by side, in fact, Diagon Alley was the largest gathering place for wizards in London. It was a huge market with all kinds of shops. On the other hand, Knockout Alley was just a secluded corner of Diagon Alley. There were many illegal, dark, magic, material shops gathered here. In fact, it was very secluded and narrow. The reason why Chen Ong came here was because it was secluded enough. The alley was dark and narrow. The dark magic shops on both sides were also dim and secluded. There was an old and ugly witch peeking at him from behind the counter. Her smile revealed her specially sharpened teeth. Chen Ong only needed one look to know that these teeth came from many different people. It seemed like this witch was the same as President Washington, having the hobby of pulling out other people's teeth and putting them in her own gums. Of course, President Washington also liked strong black maids. When he pulled out the black people's teeth, there might not even be black people's toothpaste. So Chen Ong nimbly lifted his umbrella. Although it was really just an umbrella, at least it made people think that he still needed a wand. This was to cover up the fact that this grand arcanist did not need a wand, nor did he need to perform surgery. Exorcism. This was a level 4 necromancy spell, but it was slightly modified by Chen Ong. He added some black magic. Then, Chen Ong saw the witch covering her mouth in horror. Her false teeth had already taken root in her gums. A large number of bony roots were trying to drill into her jaw. The witch fell to the ground in pain. She could not even scream. She could only make some hissing sounds. There really are teeth pulled out from the mouths of people who died a violent death. Then, let's enjoy their resentment. It's not that easy to get a gift from the dead. Chen Ong sneered and continued to walk forward. A few wizards who were peeking from the side quickly retreated into their houses. Chen Ong easily gained respect on this dangerous street. He came to Shop 13B. This shop was bigger than any dark magic shop in Knockout Alley. Of course, it was also dark and messy. Chen Ong, who no longer had any expectations for the quality of service in the magic world, walked into this dark magic shop with his head down. It looked like a traditional grocery store in China in the 19th century. There were all kinds of masks hanging on the wall. The obvious traces of curses and dark magic made Chinong feel that he could not ignore them. There was no one in the shop. The shop owner seemed to be very confident in the security of this place. He placed his goods here so easily. Some yellow wooden prosthetic eyes were soaked in glass bottles. When Chinong walked forward, the eyeballs quickly turned around. The densely packed eyes were staring at him. There were also all kinds of skulls. Chinong could tell that they belonged to different races and genders. The skulls that had been chopped off were placed on the counter. Chinong could tell that some of the materials were taken from the dead, while others were taken from the living. Of course, after they were taken off, they were definitely dead. Chapter 7:57. Chinong immediately noticed the large black cabinet next to the shelf. He could keenly read the spell cast on it. The vanishing cabinet that leads to Hogwarts? It almost caused big trouble. Chinong glanced coldly at the cabinet. It was a major loophole in Hogwarts' defense system. But Chinong did not know if it was deliberately arranged by Dumbledore. That old rabbit's schemes ran deep, not someone to be trifled with. The vanishing cabinet was also an important reason why Chinong chose to start with Karktaka's Bork. Bork was also a very well-connected person. This could be seen from the fact that Voldemort Tom Riddle had turned down a job in the Ministry of Magic and chose to work under Chinong as a shop assistant. Now another dark devil, and possibly the most dangerous dark devil in history, had his eyes on Chinong's eyes swept past the vanishing cabinet and fell on the shelf behind it. There were rolls of long ropes used by torturers, and a beautiful opal necklace was displayed in front of it. Chinong could feel the curse and resentment entwined around the necklace. He was very clear about the dark little secret of the black magic equipment business. Wizards would cast evil curses on beautiful and precious jewels, then sell them to muggles. When the evil curse on the jewels killed generation after generation of their owners, a merchant like Mr. Bork would take it away, and then it would become a precious product in the black magic shop. "Sir, do you like it?" A greasy voice came from behind Chinong. A middle-aged man with oily hair walked out of the room and said to Chinong. He was Bork. Like many wizards, he had a pair of chilling eyes and a strange and gloomy aura. "It's a good thing. This is opal from the Mediterranean islands. As you know, the production is very small. Muggles believe that people who are not born in October will bring misfortune if they have opal. But that's actually just a curse cast by wizards. The discoloration of opal, the curse of misfortune, and the misfortune of muggles will bring magical power to this necklace." Jewel of misfortune. Chinong nodded. "Yes, that's what the muggles call these cursed jewels." Bujin grinned, revealing his yellow teeth. So far, 19 muggles have lost their lives in possession of this item. This is truly an extraordinary item. It's very useful in black magic rituals. The Ministry of Magic forbids the blood sacrifice of muggles. So this kind of bad luck substitute that entangles the pain and resentment of the dead has become popular, right? Chinong asked in return. He stretched out his hand to touch it, but Bujin quickly stopped him. "Don't touch it. The curse on it is not normal." However, Chinong did not touch the string of opals. Instead, he picked up the long rope behind it. There was still a noose on the long rope used for hanging. A long rope used for hanging. There should be no less than 100 people executed on it. These are all good things. Chinong threw the long rope down and calmly wiped his hands. "But for me, it's not good enough." Hearing this, Bujin's smile became even more radiant. He pretended to be reserved and said, "Really good things. Sir, really good things are also worth a good price. My Bujin Bork Black Magic Shop is the most famous shop in Knockout Alley and also has the most complete collection of magic items. If I don't have the real good things here, then the whole magic world can't possibly have them." "What do you want, sir?" "These are substitutes. I want what they can replace," Chinong said calmly. Bujin's expression suddenly changed. He hesitated and stammered. "That kind of thing. That kind of thing is illegal. That kind of thing is illegal. How can I have it here? I am a proper businessman, and I don't even know who you are, sir. If I have the approval from the Ministry of Magic. Chin Ong seemed to have given up. He changed the topic and asked, "Can you get me living magical animals? Like centaurs, mermaids, five-legged monsters, poisonous leopards, and even fire dragons. Substitutes are also divided into different grades, right?" "No, sir, we don't have those things." Bujin's expression had completely changed. The oily smile on his face disappeared without a trace, replaced by a look of irritation and anger. He began to impatiently chase the customers away. He waved his greasy hands and scolded Chin Ong. "Go! Sir, you are not welcome here. Do you think I'm an auror from the Ministry of Magic?" Chin Ong laughed in a low voice. "But I already know what I want." Through the psionic field, Chin Ong, who had peeked into Bujin's mind, confirmed that Bujin was his target. He calmly stood at the back, waiting for Bujin to come out from behind the counter to chase him away. But when Bujin walked in front of Chin Ong, the deadly long noose drilled out from behind like a cobra and wrapped around Bujin's thick neck. The noose immediately tightened, and the thick noose easily hung Bujin in the air. The resentment of the undead entwined in the noose began to whisper in Bujin's ear. The resentment of the undead, the suffocating pain, and the cold, cruel will of Chin Ong made it impossible for Bujin to even take out his wand. Chin Ong gently tapped the noose, and the end of the noose drilled into Bujin's clothes like a nimble snake, pulling out his wand. Chin Ong held the 10¼ inch wand in his palm and observed it. He commented, "Blackthorn plum, dragonheart cord. Blackthorn plum is the most suitable material for choosing a warrior. If its owner can control black magic, then the power it can display will be astonishing. A wand made of this material needs to go through difficulties with its owner before it can truly integrate with you. At that time, it will become your most loyal servant. But let me tell you, there is no loyalty in this world in the face of power." Chin Ong raised the wand and coldly said to Bujin, "Heart drill, bone gouge." "Ah!" Bujin held in pain. Chin Ong did not stop his voice from spreading. "I heard that Tom Riddle used to be a shop assistant here?" Chin Ong asked in a low voice. "Many people fear him, but not because of his power, but because of his madness. Voldemort is not strong enough. He only uses things that make people weak, such as love and concern. Bujin, you should be fearless. Because you don't have anyone you love, you don't have to be afraid that I will be like Voldemort, placing the bodies of your family and concern in front of you. I think you are actually proud of yourself in front of Voldemort, because you can tell him that I am not afraid of you. All your tricks are no threat to me, because we are both dark wizards. I hope you can say the same to me next." Chapter 758. Mr. Bujin Bork raised his head pitifully. Those who knew him had never seen him so humble. Even when he was facing Voldemort, Voldemort would say to him, "Come on, my good brother." But this time he was almost begging. Bujin's sweaty body twitched as he begged Chin Ong, "I'll give you anything you want as long as I have it. Please tell me. No, don't torture me anymore. Heart drilling and bone gouging. Nerves sharp. Willpower clear. 5 senses sealed. Again. Heart drilling and bone gouging. No." Bujin wailed. Chin Ong's curse had made his nerves extremely sensitive. Even the faintest breeze that blew past his skin was like a steel brush. It was full of numbness, itchiness, swelling, and pain. There was no doubt that Chin Ong had improved the heart-drilling curse to make it more destructive to nerves as hard as steel. "Bujin, Bilbo Baggins, can I call you that?" Chin Ong said playfully. Bujin didn't understand the meaning behind Chin Ang's words, but being tortured by Chin Ong for no reason had already destroyed the bottom line in his heart. Even the craziest dark magus wouldn't torture someone for no reason. He thought that Chin Ong had a request which would form a bottom line in his heart so that he would know what he was persevering for. There would always be a result, no matter whether he was firm or weak. But Chenong did not. He did not say anything and experimented with the improved curse on him, as if his intention was to torture him for fun. Bourjin admitted defeat. He only wanted to know what Chenong wanted, so that he would have a reason to persevere. "No, you haven't lost yet," Chenong said calmly as he looked at him. "Bourjin, I have a question, and I want to find the answer from you." Chenong sat next to Bourjin's noose and said slowly, "We all know why Voldemort became the Dark Devil. Although there aren't many dark magi as powerful as him, there are still quite a few. He isn't the strongest, nor is he the most knowledgeable. Even you, Caractacus Bork, have areas where you surpass him. He admires bloodlines, but he himself is a muggle bastard. He thinks he is strong, but foolishly placed his soul in a soul vessel. A person who does such a stupid thing is not the most outstanding. There are many people in this world who are stronger than him, such as Dumbledore, Nicolim, Grindelwald, and even you, Bourjin Bork. But he is the only one who became the most dangerous dark wizard in history, and the wizards here do not even dare to say his name. We know the answer very well. It's because he has no attachments, because he doesn't have love. He doesn't have the weaknesses of mortals and wizards. Even though he has many followers, in his mind they are worthless. They are just tools for him to achieve his own interests. When those wizards realized that opposing Voldemort would result in the cruel torture of their family and children, they did not even dare to resist when that invisible terror descended on them. Only a few people, those who have no weaknesses and no attachments, can fight against him. Either their family has died in the hands of Voldemort, or they have a strong will and perseverance, using their powerful strength and firm belief to protect their loved ones. Dumbledore! Bourjin raised his head in horror. Yes, the greatest light wizard, the headmaster of Hogwarts. Dumbledore is such a person. Voldemort does not care about anything, but Dumbledore can sacrifice everything for the greater good. They are the same kind of people that Voldemort cannot defeat. Chenong said softly, "Bourjin, you are also such a person. I do not care about the people that Voldemort enslaved and brought fear to them, because if they can submit once, they can kneel a second time. My question is there anything that can defeat people like you? Defeat Dumbledore. Defeat Voldemort, make them fear and make them submit?" Chenong calmly looked into Bourjin's eyes and asked, "Can you give me this answer?" Bourjin trembled as he said in a trembling voice, "This is impossible." "Take your time, Mr. Bourjin. I am not in a hurry. Now, I need to settle down and use your place to prepare for some experiments." Chenong slowly stood up and said, "As for your experiments, I am very patient." After saying that, he waved Bourjin's wand and turned him into an owl. Bourjin was horrified to feel that he could no longer control his body. A virtual owl's consciousness was controlling his body in place of him. Most of the time, he could freely control himself, but if Chenong needed, he could take over the transformed owl at any time. "What is your real name?" Chenong suddenly frowned and said, "Let me think. Caractacus Bork?" A person's real name was magical. The most powerful prophecy spell that Chenong had mastered was one of the most powerful legendary spells of the School of Prophecy. He could use a person's real name as a coordinate to inherit all the causes and effects that made up his existence. As Chenong's wand flickered, all the external relationships that made up Bourjin's existence were entrusted to the real name Caractacus Bork. Chenong picked out the relevant causes and effects of Bourjin and stripped them along with his name. At this time, Bourjin saw a figure appear on the other side of the glass door through the reflection. He excitedly flapped his wings, thinking that Chenong would dodge, but he didn't expect him to just stand there without any disguise. The door was pushed open, and an old and ugly witch who looked like a shriveled orange peel appeared at the door. She was holding a tray filled with human fingernails. The witch stood at the door. When she saw Chenong, she grinned, revealing her green teeth, and said, "Mr. Bourjin, I heard an unusual sound from outside. It's great to see that you're all right. Mr. Bujin? Bujin, who had turned into an owl, couldn't help but struggle more violently when he saw the witch call Chinong. Chinong had no intention of stopping him, but the witch noticed the owl. She covered her mouth in surprise and said, "Someone is here to deliver a letter to you." That howling letter wasn't soft at all. Bujin wanted to rush forward to check if she was under a spell of confusion. Otherwise, how could she have mistaken Chinong for himself without any doubt? "I'm closing the door. Get out of here," Chinong ordered. Bujin thought that the witch would have realized something was wrong, but the witch naturally understood what Chinong meant. She bowed her head and left Bujin's black magic shop. Chinong raised his hand and cast a warning spell on the shop. He then dragged Bujin's transformed owl into the back room with one hand. It wasn't easy to get a sample. He had to clear up the previous problem first. Chinong's curiosity about the wizard's bloodline had to be explained. He started preparing the surgical instruments and turned Bujin back into his human form. Chapter 759. As a famous black market tycoon, Bujin had several properties under his name, as well as various businesses that were under his control. When these were all replaced by Chinong's true name magic, he no longer lacked the manpower and resources to conduct his experiments. Bujin, who had turned into an owl, could only watch as Chinong used his shop, controlled his businesses, used his connections, and even spent his money. Even those properties that had been cursed with the undying loyalty curse naturally opened their doors to their owner. This was because in any judgment, Chinong, who had taken away Bujin's true name, was Bujin himself. In fact, he was even more similar to Bujin than Bujin. Bujin could see with his own eyes how magic had taken away everything from him. In the beginning, Bujin thought that Chinong had only used a powerful confusion curse to make everyone think that he was Bujin. But later on, he saw with his own eyes how Chinong easily took out his family's treasured magic books and related inheritances. He even boldly entered Gringotts, Bujin's treasury, and took out his money. Bujin almost went crazy. "You can't do this." Bujin begged, "Leave something for me." This was the most futile struggle he had when he saw Chinong pass the curse test and take out the Bork family's inherited dark magic book. One had to know that the Bork family had intermarried with the Blake family. His grandfather had married the Blake headmaster's daughter, Belvina. Because of this, the Bork family had obtained a portion of the Blake family's inherited dark magic book. However, these things needed to pass the Blake family's bloodline test before they could be opened to magi. But now, Chinong was holding a shadowy magic book and reading it. This was the Blake family's book on the 3 unforgivable curses. It looked like a dense shadow, but in fact, Chinong had found it in the shadow of the fireplace in the Bork family's old mansion. How could the shadow read it? Bujin did not know that, in fact, he could only read it when the first ray of sunlight shone on the shadow with his Blake bloodline. But now it was flipping around freely in Chinong's hand, like a burning whore who couldn't wait to dance around the thief's hand. "Something of yours?" Chinong looked up from the magic book and smiled. "What's something of yours?" "This is mine." "You are a nameless person. Remember, what you have now is just an illusory memory. Except for the memory that belongs to Bujin Bok, which is also my memory, you have nothing. You are a new person. Or an owl. Does it depend on what I want to turn you into? My modified baleful polymorph combines the profoundness of arcana polymorph, the naturalness and harmony of ancient druid polymorph, and the convenience and fun of wizard polymorph. It's a permanent baleful polymorph. The key lies in permanent and malice. Permanent means that if I don't cast a spell to remove it, you will never recover, and only I can remove the spell. And the meaning of malice is that I can take the initiative, depending on whether I have good or bad intentions, to let the transfiguration magic manifest on your body. In other words, if I want to, I can give you the brain of an owl and hope that it can contain your shallow and poor consciousness. Of course, If I take away your memory, you will have nothing. The name Bwajin Bok will have nothing to do with you, and you will become a completely new person or something else. If I turn you into a male dog, you will have to pray for a miracle so that you won't have any urges for a small furry animal. Bwajin was trembling. It was a funny thing for an owl to do. He opened his mouth and let out a mournful howl. Chun-Ong raised his wand and cast a baleful polymorph on him. Then Bwajin couldn't control his appetite for the small animals in the shadows. He flapped his wings and flew towards the squirming mouse in the dark house. After Chun-Ong turned a few more pages of the book, Bwajin flew back. The owl's face had a lifelike expression of despair. Chun-Ong glanced at him and casually turned him back to human form. After Bwajin returned to his original form, he reflexively felt nauseous. He wanted to vomit, but the feeling of the fur in his stomach made his hair stand on end. I remember wizards didn't care about these things. You would eat raw frog livers, swallow a half-grown poisonous toad alive, chew a dead mouse or even a rotten one. Why do you have such a physical revulsion? Chun-Ong asked with interest. He closed the book of shadow magic. Bwajin crawled forward like a disheveled house elf. He placed Chun-Ang's foot on top of his head and said in a trembling voice, "My master!" Chun-Ong smiled coldly and touched his heart with his wand. Bwajin immediately felt a twisting pain in his body. His body began to twist and shrink until he looked like a bag of bones. His head, however, did not change. It looked comically large and small. His greasy hair began to fall out. His nose became long and sharp. His ears drooped like a pig's. His face became wrinkled and wrinkled. He was naked and bony, with a pair of bulging eyes the size of tennis balls. Boggin felt his new body and then screamed like a fairy. He knew what he had become, a house elf. He looked at Chun-Ong, wanting to vent his anger and fear. But an inexplicable restraint in his mind, the power of the contract, made him completely collapse. He had a splitting headache, and he had to hug a table leg and keep banging his head against it so that the pain from the outside world would disperse the invisible pain that was working in his mind. "Master! Master!" Bwajin screamed, reaching out to Chun-Ong. "Forgive me, Master! Forgive me!" Chun-Ong threw him a broken pillowcase. Bwajin sobbed as he put it on. He knew that he had been transformed into a complete house elf. The memories of Bwajin were still in his mind, but they only made him confused because a deep-rooted nature had taken root in his brain. "You see, it's not difficult to make you obey and fear, is it?" Chun-Ong smiled. Chapter 760. But what's really interesting is the legend of the origin of this creature. It's said that there used to be two families of wizards on Delia Island, the McClivos and the McBuns. Because of a drunken manslaughter, the two families formed a blood debt. One night, the McClivos wizard surrounded the McBuns' house and used a transfiguration spell to transform all the McBuns into five-legged monsters. This is the origin of the five-legged monsters. Later, I realized that when the ancient wizards created the magical creatures, a black magic transfiguration spell played a key role. On the other hand, the few times in the history of magic when the fairies rebelled and the appearance of the house elves may also have been influenced by this transfiguration spell. I believe that when dealing with the rebellious fairies, some ancient black wizards used transfiguration spell to transform them into the predecessors of the house elves. Then they used a related spell to enslave their brains, and used contract magic to pass on this enslavement, resulting in the current house elves. Therefore, a few days ago, I got my hands on a five-legged monster through your channels and dissected that little house elf of yours. Of course, no mystical creatures were harmed during this process. In the end, they were all strengthened and modified, even gaining true freedom. I've also finally recovered a portion of the content of the ancient black magic's transformation technique. Then I conducted an experiment on you just now, and the result was very successful. We still don't know what spell the ancient wizards used to enslave the house elves, but they must have been extremely evil. Modern wizards, including that Dumbledore, don't seem to have any objections. Now that I've developed a spell to turn wizards into house elves, if I provide it to those pure-blooded wizards, will they turn all Muggle wizards into house elves? If I transform Dumbledore into a house elf, will he show his love and tolerance? I believe that Hogwarts needs the services of Dumbledore the house elf. Ha! Chin-Ong laughed and nodded his head. Boijin trembled at the side. He muttered, Master will be the most terrifying black devil in history. Wizards will tremble at your feet. Dumbledore, go to hell. Long live Master. The ancient Magi's modifications are truly evil. Chen-Ong looked at him and sighed. After enslaving a race for centuries, a race that is not inferior to the wizards, or even more powerful, the house elf was cursed and contracted. But because of this, not only did its bloodline not degenerate during the inheritance, but it also maintained its magic power when the wizards were constantly degenerating. Now, the magic power of most house elves is far stronger than that of their masters. Malfoy is probably no match for them, and Kreacher actually survived the contract and curse while fighting against Voldemort. If I let them obtain true freedom, how will they repay their masters, the wizards who trampled on them? Interesting. Master. Boijin grabbed Chen-Ang's trousers in fear and said timidly, I don't have a name yet. According to the naming rules of House Elf, you will be called Gru. Chen-Ong clenched the wand in his hand and said calmly, a new rule is coming into effect. A race that has been enslaved is about to be liberated. They deserve to be free and vent their anger at being enslaved. Morgoth needs to bestow favor on them and make them obey. They have to obey because Morgoth is their destined master. Those who enslave others are destined to be enslaved, and those who are enslaved will obtain the freedom they promised until they worship Morgoth as their master and realize that Morgoth is indeed the greatest. Chen-Ong clicked on the Lord God's quest prompt. Main Quest 1. Obtain a valid identity in Hogwarts Academy. Quest completed. Main Quest 2 activated. Reward: 8,000 reward points. If the quest fails, 20,000 reward points will be deducted. If the quest fails, the reward will be erased. Side Quest 1. Open the Chamber of Secrets. Reward: 5,000 reward points. If the quest fails, 5,000 reward points will be deducted. If the quest fails, the reward will be erased. Side Quest 2. Win the top 3 cup. Quest completed. Reward: 5,000 reward points. If the quest fails, 5,000 reward points will be deducted. If the quest fails, the reward will be erased. After Chen-Ong entered the HP world, he received a mission notification from the Lord God. However, he did not intend to devote his energy to the mission. His main purpose was to contact Darth Morgoth. This was the rule projection of His Holiness Ong-Chen, the god who represented the force of darkness and evil. He had once caused a battle for the Silmarils on the Faerun continent. He had raised a Silmaril that represented his divinity into the sky and entered the astral world, giving birth to a star on the Faerun continent. And Morgothes could interfere with the Faerun continent through the star known as Mirko. Chen-Ong felt that before the Republic of Republic launched a counterattack on the Lord God's dimension, he needed something else to distract the Lord God's attention. It just so happened that Darth Morgoth, the projection of his counterpart from another dimension, wanted to spread his presence to other worlds. Both sides hit it off. Chen-Ong was preparing to raise the star representing Morgoth. After the star of Mirko rose, Morgoth would use this star to carry out his will in the HP world. According to the agreement, he was going to find trouble with the Lord God and spread his presence to multiple worlds. In short, he was going to cause trouble. Gru. Chen-Ong turned his head and ordered. A house elf draped in rags flashed in front of Chen-Ong using the Phantom Shift spell. It lay on the ground for a while before shaking its groggy head and getting up. Chen-Ong kicked it 3 meters away and reprimanded. As a house elf, you are really useless." Gru got up and wailed. Gru is the shame of house elves. Gru is useless. Gru made Master angry. Gru deserves to die. Familiarize yourself with your body. The way a house elf uses a spell is different from a wizard. Chinong said coldly. He threw Bujin's wand to it and said in a low voice, "From now on, you will use the phantom spell to disguise yourself as Bujin. Help me manage the related industries and familiarize yourself with the spell. If anything goes wrong, I will give you a sock." Gru screamed, "Don't chase me away, Master." "Then work hard. When my plan is completed, I might return Bujin's name to you. But if you disappoint me, then prepare to be a house elf for the rest of your life." With that, Chin-Ong did not care about Gru hitting the pillar and said, "Gru wants to be a house elf for the rest of his life." "No, Master, I will definitely complete the task. Please protect my name. I am Gru." "No, I am Bujin." Chapter 761. Chin-Ong was temporarily staying at Boggin's estate in Hogsmeade, the only village in England that was entirely populated by wizards. Hogwarts School was located next to the large lake that originated from the village. The architecture here was eccentric. The cottages had thatched roofs, like a medieval village. Even though wizards had been able to build tall, modern buildings like the Ministry of Magic, Chinong was still unable to do so. However, the neurotic and eccentric nature of wizards was engraved in their blood, so they would make all kinds of choices that normal people would find strange. On one hand, it was because wizards who mastered magic power had different living habits from muggles. Most muggles thought dangerous and troublesome things were just a matter of waving their wands. Therefore, they were clumsy and impatient. It was as if the words careful and tidy did not exist in their dictionary. For muggles, messy and disorganized habits would make them unable to find things, but for wizards, it was just a matter of a flying spell. They were also not afraid of breaking or destroying things, because as long as it was not a magic item, a repair-as-new spell could restore it to its original state. And when it was a mess, a clean-as-new spell could make it as neat as new. Therefore, wizards had a different understanding of damage, and mess than muggles. They could not care about these problems that could be easily solved by magic. Therefore, in the eyes of muggles, they were all like naughty children, endlessly indulging themselves. On the other hand, the magic bloodline that gave them made them neurotic, crazy, and eccentric. According to the results of Chen Ang's research on Boggin's bloodline, the surging magic in the bloodline would erode their rationality. This result surprised Chinong, because wizards eventually developed in the direction of Cthulhu, or in other words, they eventually leaned towards magic. Magic power, on the other hand, was completely different from the rational perspective that humans use to observe the world. Magic power was another way of observing the world. From the perspective of science and humans, it seemed somewhat chaotic and difficult to interpret. Its logic and internal laws were indescribable and chaotic in the eyes of humans. The magic of wizards, in the end, was indescribable. The more powerful a wizard was, the crazier he would be. Of course, this was also the proof that they were closer to the truth of magic, because this kind of magic itself was chaotic and irrational. If the arcana that Chinong learned was the rationality and wisdom of magic, then the magic of the wizards in this world was the manifestation of the chaotic and disorderly side of magic. The young wizards who have just awakened their magic are the closest to a normal human being. But as they grow older, the magic in their blood will gradually erode their rationality, making it harder and harder for them to understand humans, or what they call muggles, because muggles, are governed by reason. The behavior of the old wizards was getting weirder and weirder. They would eat the livers of toads, the innards of bats, and the eyes of eels. They would allow their appearance to change, usually becoming uglier and more distorted, with protruding knuckles, skinny as bones, and close to insanity. Of course, these symptoms would only appear in the most severe cases of mages. Under normal circumstances, only the poorest mages at the bottom of society would become like this in their later years. Learning powerful black magic would also accelerate this symptom. They would be corroded by magic to the point of almost mutating. And those pure blood families with deep roots, because of inherited magic and superior bloodline, rarely showed such changes before old age. Magic eroded their rationality, but magic helped them to slow down the process. Pure blood families, they were the product of natural law and human selection, the survival of the fittest. Their bloodline was relatively stable, and they were resistant to the erosion of magic. So even when they died of old age, they only looked a little weird. They would carefully choose their own marriage partners to prevent the deterioration of their bloodline. Even so, the magic of their natural bloodline would continue to deteriorate, and they would become weaker and smaller. However, for those poor sorcerer families with poor bloodlines, pure-blooded sorcerers had the right to look down on them, even to the extent of viewing them as scum. Chin Ong had investigated in the taverns where sorcerers often gathered and discovered that most non-pure-blooded families would become lunatics in the eyes of normal people as they aged. Of course, the Ministry of Magic turned a blind eye to this. The magic resistance of pure blood families was not unconditional. Once they became proficient in black magic, they would also show signs of this kind of madness. Mud Seed was not the twisted pride of the pure blood sorcerers. It was a disdainful title given to the non-pure blood sorcerers after they saw the sorcerers who were not pure blood and had not been filtered for a long time become ugly and crazy in their old age. They began to eat stinky things such as toads and bats, and they became bloodthirsty and mentally unstable. They realized that if they allowed non-pure blood to mix with their bloodline, it would cause their noble bloodline to deteriorate. Coupled with the impact of wizards with muggle blood on the interests, there were two schools of thought in the magic world about the erosion of magic. The representative of the pure blood families, Voldemort, proposed that the greatness of wizards came from their bloodline. Wizards with pure blood had strong magic power and were elegant and calm, while wizards with mixed blood with muggles would eventually become twisted and ugly. The light wizards, led by Dumbledore, believed that the root cause of wizards becoming evil, dark, and crazy was black magic, and that wizards with muggle blood only had a lower resistance to black magic. Of course, in Chen Ang's opinion, both sides were idiots. No one dared to propose that the factor that caused wizards to become crazy was magic, because that would be denying the pride of the entire magic world. Wizards were proud of their own magic. They believed that all that made them extraordinary was those magical spells and powerful magic power. If they were to deny magic power, wouldn't that be the same as denying everything about them? Undoubtedly, Bujin also showed his twisted and eccentric side. He cast the fiery loyalty curse in Hogsmeade Village, but it was dirty and messy inside. The houses were dilapidated, showing the same aesthetics of wizards as the Broken Cauldron Pub, Number 12, Grimald Square, and the Shack. It was surprisingly consistent with the style of Hogsmeade Village and Diagon Alley. For wizards, keeping clean and tidy only required 1 or 2 spells. It was not difficult to create a magnificent, comfortable, and luxurious residence. Magic was enough to achieve all this, but they just had to be dirty and small. Other than mental problems, what else could explain all this? Chin Ong pushed open the door, which was full of fingernail scratches and made people's hair stand on end. The porch was a large, empty room with peeling wallpaper, tattered carpet stained with dried blood, some rusty lanterns, and some chandeliers and candlesticks covered with broken cobwebs. There was a staircase leading upstairs. On the wall, there were some portraits that had turned black with age. Hearing the sound of the door being pushed open, these portraits began to wake up. They turned to look at Chinong and suddenly opened their mouths to mumble. The ear-piercing sounds intertwined with each other, and some of the portraits of old women began to scream. Chinong looked at them coldly. He raised his hand slightly and said softly, "Avada wants to kill." Suddenly, the whole room became quiet. Chin-Ong walked among the frozen portraits and slowly walked up the stairs. Behind him, the house elf Gollum showed a horrified expression. It excitedly shook the silent portraits and screamed, "Grandpa Herbert, Grandma Belvina? Aunt Bernamo? Oh my God, Master, you killed them. Shut up. Those are just fake memories. Their reactions, their actions, were all driven by the curse behind them. Letting the portraits come to life is definitely one of the most stupid things in history. I really don't know what these wizards were thinking. Let the dead die, but why did they create a pile of fake memories and use a curse to deceive themselves?" He glanced at the dirty room and ordered Gollum, "Tidy up this place. Make it spotless. Put all the messy things in the basement. I don't want to see anything useless except for the necessary furniture." Chapter 762. For the next 3 days, Chun-Ong ordered Gru around like a tired dog. It had to beg Chun-Ong to cast an illusion spell on it so that it could maintain Bujin's appearance and discuss business with the dark wizards it was familiar with. The gold coins in Bujin's vault flowed out like water in exchange for the bodies of precious magical animals or magic herbs. The eight-eyed spider in the dense jungle of Kalimantan, the chimera in the mountains of Greece, the black dragon flying in the sky above the Haiti Islands, the fireball dragon living in the ancient land of China, the poisonous cyst leopard in the great Rift Valley of East Africa. The cubs and eggs of these precious or dangerous magical animals were transported in batches to Chun-Ang's laboratory. Chun-Ong cast a traceless stretch spell on a suitcase, expanding it to a huge space of about 500 acres so that Gru could place the magical animals. When it saw the huge space, Gru was deeply shocked. Pino, another house elf who used to belong to Bujin, was now in charge of taking care of these magical animals. Pino, who completely treated Chun-Ong as his master, did not recognize Gru at all and even wanted to bully him. Only then did Gru realize that without the constraints of the magic contract, he could not control this house elf at all. In fact, Pino was much better than him in the application of magic spells. Gru, who had already become a slave, was now fighting with his house elf to please Chun-Ang's recent experiments were trying to create a snake monster. Legend had it that the snake monster came from the magic egg laid by a 7-year-old rooster when it was in the sky above Sirius, and it was hatched by a toad. Chun-Ong judged that it would undoubtedly require a high-level black magic to make a rooster lay an egg when it was in the sky above Sirius. He tried to transform the rooster into a hen and use the power of Sirius to curse the rooster, but he failed in the end. The eggs laid by the rooster had no life force or aura of soul at all. The main reason was that Sirius was in the sky. Sirius usually appeared in winter or early spring, so it was easier to use its power using the winter triangle as a reference. It was summer in the northern hemisphere. Although Chun-Ong moved the experiment site to the southern hemisphere with magic, the experiment was still disrupted. Chun-Ong had read a lot of magic books about creating basilisks. He found that although this magical creature seemed easy to create, there had been no sightings of it for 400 years. Maybe it was because all the witnesses had died, but this at least showed how difficult it was. In the end, Chun-Ong discovered that it was still a curse problem. The essence of the basilisk was a magical creature created by using the power of Sirius. The rooster and toad were just a kind of magic medium to create its body. In the book of Isaiah, there was a record of the basilisk. They break the eggs of vipers and weave spider webs. The person who swallowed the egg would find a poisonous lizard inside after breaking the egg. The poisonous lizard here was a snake monster. Since then, this magical creature often appeared in the Bible. The most detailed mention was in a book written by the famous wizard Alexander Nacum in the 1280s AD. However, it was not included in the poisonous lizard section. Instead, it was included in the rooster section. Its egg must be laid in the days of Sirius and fertilized by a 7-year-old rooster. This kind of egg is easy to recognize. It is not an ordinary egg, but spherical without a shell, covered with a thick layer of skin. And this egg must be incubated by a toad, so it will hatch into this extremely poisonous monster, a snake with the characteristics of a toad and a rooster. Chun-Ong believed that he had found the origin of this monster. It was born in Israel, Greece, Abraxas or Abraxas, Abrasax or Abraxas. Abraxas was the supreme being in the cosmology system of the Gnostics, an important heretical sect of early Christianity. However, due to the defeat of the Gnostics in the battle against the Orthodox Christianity, Abraxas was demoted to a fallen angel in the scriptures of the Orthodox Christianity. He had the head of a rooster and the lower body of a snake, and his attainments in alchemy were extremely profound. In the description of the Gnostics, Abraxas was actually a synonym for the invisible supreme, the creator of spirituality and existence higher than God. Chun-Ong believed that the snake monster's black magic ritual should have originated from this mysterious sect that combined Greek philosophy, Persian Zoroastrianism, Egyptian mystery religion, Babylonian astrology, and so on. It was the sect's attempt to trace back to an inferior version of the invisible supreme ritual. The snake monster's creator, the despicable Hilbo, had obtained a part of the Gnostics' magic ritual. In order to obtain the power of this sect, he used black magic to steal a trace of Abraxas' power. The despicable Hilbo was a Greek black wizard who spoke in a snake language. Greece was the region where the Gnostics were active. This clumsy imitation was the snake monster. At this time, Chun-Ong had completely understood how to create a snake monster. Stealing a trace of Abraxas' power was a piece of cake for him. He also discovered some secrets of the ancient wizards. Although the wizards claimed that there was no god in the world, the so-called Jesus was only a powerful wizard. However, it was a self-evident fact that the ancient wizard civilization originated from the mystical knowledge passed down by the ancient sections. The magic of the wizards was actually the knowledge passed down by the ancient sects that originated from the god. The ancient gods, on the other hand, were an indescribable, abnormally chaotic non-personality. This coincided with the magic that Chun-Ong discovered in the blood of the modern wizards. After knowing how to create the snake monster, Chun-Ong lost interest in creating the snake monster. He felt that the technical content of such a magical creature like the snake monster was too low. If he wanted to create it, it would be better to create the predecessor of the snake monster, a non-inferior version of the Gnostic sects, the invisible supreme being, Abraxas. Chun-Ong planned to create such an existence in several stages. First, he would create a snake monster to practice his skills. Then he would create the Jewish angel Obase with a coxcomb's head and a snake's body. Chun-Ong speculated that this kind of angel should have the special power to kill upon sight. Its name, Abracadabra, meant "I bless the dead." And the ancient magic text, Avada Kedavra in Aramaic, meant everything will be destroyed. This would be an angel of death. According to the description of its magic power in the magic text, everything the snake monster saw would be petrified, and everything Obase saw would be destroyed and die. Because this ancient magic ritual was too incomplete, Chun-Ong tried his best to collect information and complete it. He then modified it according to what he had learned. He used the arcane magic of instant death as the core and focused on Obase divinity. The final creation should be a divine creature, although Obase should be an angel based on his status. What Chun-Ong created with magic was only a symbolic creature, after all, and could only touch the boundary of a divine creature. In the end, Chun-Ong wanted to create Abraxas, the invisible supreme one, which was the creation of spirituality and existence higher than God. The basilisk was just a clumsy imitation of him. Without even a billionth of his power, it would be too difficult to trace him using the ritual of creating the basilisk. Even the original Gnostic ritual would not be able to trace 1/10,000th of his existence. Originally, I just wanted to create a snake monster for fun, but I didn't expect it to become such a big project in the end. I can only say, fate makes fools of people. Chun-Ong sighed as he looked at the third version of the design that he had modified. This was indeed a big project. Chun-Ong might not be able to complete it even if he had 50 years, but once it was created, it would be enough to be the carrier of Morgoth. Gru looked at the design, which was full of complex magic symbols. Its face was full of shock and confusion. It could no longer understand what was contained in the design, even if it was a ritual used to create a snake monster. After Chun-Ang's improvement, the hatched snake monster would not be an ordinary one. Chapter 763. Chun-Ang, who was immersed in magic research, analyzing the bloodlines of magical animals and biochemical experiments, as well as the unfinished research in God's dimension, was only called out of the lab by Gru a week later. Chun-Ang, who was immersed in his studies and research, was not in a good mood after being interrupted. He had just made a breakthrough in his research on trolls. From his analysis of the arcane experiments, he found that the bloodline of trolls was quite similar to the bloodline power in a tube of troll-strengthening serum from the World of Warcraft that he had bought in God's dimension. Arcane research on biological bloodlines was different from technology's obsession with genetic inheritance. Although the expression of the genes in the two samples was quite different in terms of arcane classification, they were very similar in nature. Chun-Ang originally wanted to add another race to the world of magic to recreate the grand scene of the various aliens from the World of Warcraft fighting for supremacy in Azeroth. Even the basic materials were already provided for him by this world. Murlocs could be strengthened into Naga and Murlocs. Centaurs could be modified into centaurs. Ghosts needed negative energy radiation to have the foundation to mutate, and most likely needed Professor Chen's help to modify them before they could evolve into undead. Ghouls, vampires, and werewolves all had incomplete bloodlines, and Professor Chen had a lot of materials to make them whole. The bloodline strengthening routes for trolls were mostly divided into two types. One was the Farron type of trolls, which had amazing recovery abilities, and the other was the indigenous trolls of Azeroth. In the future, after being modified by magic radiation, they might even be able to transform into night elves. Among the materials that Chun-Ang had collected in God's dimension, there were quite a few bloodlines similar to magical creatures, and the many magical creatures in the world of magic were also a rich biological wealth. Using this world as a large-scale experimental site, it was a good idea to do a large-scale biochemical experiment. Just as Chun-Ang was methodically preparing for the experiment, he was disturbed by Gru. Chun-Ang calmly looked at this frightened house elf. Gru trembled and secretly glanced at Chun-Ang's dark expression, so it trembled even more. It opened its mouth a few times, but could not form a proper sentence. Chun-Ang looked at this useless elf, and his mood was actually not as bad as it thought. Instead, he was thinking with great interest. The spells that ancient wizards used on fairies for dozens of generations still had such a strong binding force, and could even brainwash a vicious dark wizard into this in just a few days. This piqued his interest. "Master, old Malfoy just tried to contact you, wise Mr. Boggin. He had a batch of black magic items that he wanted to sell to his master. Among them were black magic items that Voldemort had rewarded him, as well as some poisons and magic books that had been passed down from generation to generation in the Malfoy family, as well as some goods that old Malfoy had obtained himself. Although it wasn't the best was buried under his living room. It was still the best in the market, but we're already short of funds. Should we buy them? You don't have to worry about funds. The gold coins that the sprites have will be mine sooner or later." Chun-Ang's eyes were unfocused, and no one knew what he was thinking. A black magic item of the Malfoy family. "I remember there was news recently that the Ministry of Magic is preparing to conduct a raid, and the situation is rather tense. That's why Malfoy is preparing to transfer the evidence left behind from Voldemort's era, right?" Chun-Ang asked. Gru replied, carefully, "Yes, that's all the Ministry of Magic's way of getting money. Foggy, the Minister of Magic, is stupid. Even though everyone knows that he was pushed to power by Dumbledore, and Dumbledore only pushed him to power because those powerful big shots were either purebloods who colluded with Voldemort or were rejected by the purebloods. Foggy, that idiot, just happened to have a glib tongue and was liked by those mud wizards at the bottom of the hierarchy. At the same time, he wouldn't be rejected by the purebloods. His brain isn't bad, but his bloodline isn't bad, and he didn't collude with Voldemort, so he was allowed to power. But after he came to power, he showed his stupidity. Master, we all know that he won't last long. That's why he's trying to make money. This kind of black magic item raid always causes those families who are on the wrong side and supported Voldemort to bleed out. The Malfoys used to be so mighty, but why is it not as great as it used to be? Isn't it the result of the Ministry of Magic's harvesting? Foggy got money for the Ministry of Magic and gave those who weren't purebloods or didn't have a deep relationship with Voldemort the opportunity to squeeze out Malfoy's business. He gradually gained a foothold and became the Minister of Magic. I didn't know he had such a trick up his sleeve. Gru slowly recalled the cunning and wisdom of Bujin, and his analysis was clear and logical. However, he was affected by his identity as a house elf. On one hand, he was sinister and cunning, and on the other hand, he bowed and scraped under Chin-Ang's eyes. Oh, Chin-Ang was puzzled. Then will it be safe for Malfoy to give you these things? Will you be able to handle these troubles? Don't get too involved and disturb me. Gru hurriedly jumped up. Master, that won't happen. This operation is mainly aimed at Malfoy and the other lackeys of Voldemort. I still have some influence in the Ministry of Magic, so they won't be able to get you involved. I'll definitely get things done and won't cause any trouble. Very good. When will Malfoy bring the things to you? Chin-Ang nodded. Gru smiled fawningly. Probably the day after tomorrow. When the time comes, I'll personally receive them. I'm also very curious about the bloodline of the Platinum family. Dragon plague and syphilis aren't things that just anyone can get infected with. Chin-Ang smiled. Chin-Ang was really interested in the Malfoy family. Old Malfoy's name, Lucius, had the meaning of Venus, and Venus was the morning star. Thus, it was also the original name of the son of the morning star, Lucifer. It meant the son of light, the messenger of dawn. Combined with the tradition of a pure-blood family named after a constellation, it was not eye-catching. But his son, Draco or Draco Malfoy, his name meant the dragon star. Interestingly, he was very similar to the name of the famous Count Dracula. In Latin, Draco meant dragon or snake, while Dracula was the son of the dragon in English. One was a variation of dragon, and the other was the son of the dragon. It was no wonder that Draco Malfoy was so obsessed with dragons. The names of both father and son were actually the famous Devil King of Antichrist, which explained the evil lineage of their family. Chin-Ang felt that they were quite fated with dragons. It was not the fire dragon of this world, but the ancient dragon that represented Satan and ancient evil, also known as the ancient serpent. And Chin-Ang's body was born after the ancient serpent Chin-Ang gave the apocalypse clone Adam's wisdom. Before Chin-Ang left the Marvel world, he saw that the ancient serpent was not completely dead, but existed as the ancient dragon that would bring the ultimate dusk to the Asgardians. Chapter 764. Harry Potter could still hear Mrs. Weasley's words ringing in his ears. Close your eyes. There are many witchcraft mantles that we can choose as our final destination. But don't worry, as long as you tell us where you want to go, everything will be fine. Don't panic. Don't come out too early. Stay in the fireplace and only come out when you see Fred and George. But he seemed to have spelled Diagon Alley wrong. The spinning just now almost made him throw up. He had been staying at the Weasley shack for the summer holidays. It was much warmer than his aunt's house. At least the Weasley family did not have a fat and stupid child like Dolly. But before school started, when they went to Diagon Alley together, while sprinkling Floo powder through the fireplace, he yelled for the wrong destination. Through a rapidly spinning place full of green flames, he saw a blurry image of a fireplace and a house from the corner of his eye. But in his mind he thought, "Stop!" He fell from mid-air onto the cold stone wall. His glasses flew out, and now his vision was a blur. Through the mosaic, Harry managed to find his glasses. They were a little broken, but they were still usable. When Harry put the glasses on his ears and his vision became clear again, He found himself in a dark, wide fireplace that looked like a wizard's shop. But it was full of strange things, even if the things in a wizard's shop were strange enough. However, the items here were more bizarre and dazzling than those in any other shop. Beside him was a glass display case. Inside it was a sculpture of a red monster, or perhaps a specimen. But from the appearance of the monster, Harry sincerely prayed that it was not a specimen of a real creature. The monster had a goat's head, 2 long and sharp horns. Its red skin was bare and hairless, but it was covered with burn marks and scars. Its ears were like those of a fairy, but its whole body was like a very muscular human. Looking at its muscles, Harry thought that this monster must be strong and violent. There was an inconspicuous label under the glass case. Harry glanced at it and read, "Rogue Encampment. Specimen of a fallen. Be careful if you encounter a wizard. This monster may come back to life." When Harry read the last section of the label, he was shocked by the owner's bloody warning. He took a few steps back in shock and bumped his head into a pile of hard-covered books behind him. The books scattered all over the floor. Harry hurriedly got up and accidentally placed his hand on a hard-covered black magic book. Through the scattered pages, Harry saw a series of evil magic rituals that made him blush. He hurriedly threw the book back into the pile. Only then did Harry notice how strange this place was. There were all kinds of masks on the wall staring at people with horrified expressions. There was a stone mask with fangs under its lips, a clown with blood-red eyes, and a jaw that could open and close. Looking closely, there was a line of tags under it that read, "I want to play a game with you." There was a label under it that said, "I want to play a game with you." There was a mask that looked like a pig's nose, covering the lower half of the face, revealing only the mouth and nose with a fence. There was also a worn-out hockey mask with a small print under it that said, "Come to Mommy, Jason. Mommy loves you." There was a green wooden mask with only an upright iron ridge as the bridge of the nose. There was a label that said, "According to unreliable sources, this mask is the work of Loki, the god of mischief." After I asked Loki, he denied it. The weirdest thing was a gold-plated steel mask. The high-tech design made it stand out from the rest of the weird old masks. Other than that, there was a wooden mask with a spiral pattern showing only one eye, a golden mask that looked like it was made of gold, full of majesty and dominance, a skull mask that was missing a quarter of the upper right corner, and of course the most peculiar thing was a pair of black-rimmed glasses placed in the center of the mask. It was the most ordinary but the most extraordinary of all the masks. Harry noticed the comment below and lightly described, "This is a pair of glasses that no one can recognize when you take it off. It's the best match for a high-waisted suit." "What a magical tool!" Harry sighed as he rubbed his glasses. "I'd better get out of here as soon as possible." Harry thought to himself that his nose was still throbbing from hitting it against the fireplace. Ignoring that, he crept briskly towards the door. But when he was halfway there, he saw 2 figures on the other side of the glass door. One of them was the last person Harry wanted to see, Dracula Malfoy, especially now that he was lost, covered in soot, and wearing a pair of broken glasses. Harry looked around and found a big black cupboard on his left. It was really a big cupboard made of heavy wood. He took a big stride and opened the door of the cupboard. It was full of thick fur coats. The tall cupboard was like a small room. Harry rushed in and closed the door, leaving only a small gap, just enough to see what was going on in the shop outside. In his panic, he didn't notice that there was also a small label on the top of the cupboard. It read, "Magic cupboard made of the last apple of youth." Harry paid no attention to what was hidden in the depths of the closet behind him. He listened. A few seconds later, the doorbell rang, and Malfoy and his father walked into the store. Harry's hair stood on end when he saw his old enemy. He didn't feel the cold air blowing on his neck. He was so engrossed in spying on Malfoy that he didn't even notice the cold air behind him. Malfoy frowned at the unfamiliar furnishings as soon as he stepped into the shop. He hesitated for a moment to confirm that this was Boggin's shop of dark magic. He then rang the bell at the counter. Then he turned to his son and said, Don't touch anything, Dracula. Malfoy was admiring a glass jar filled with liquid. Floating in the jar were a bunch of bright red eyeballs. He heard Harry's words and said, "I thought you were going to buy me a present. Look, it's so beautiful." Old Malfoy looked back and saw the pair of bright red eyeballs, full of life and resistance. He frowned and said, "Dracula, that's not a good thing. It carries a strong sense of misfortune, and will definitely bring misfortune to its owner." Looking at the pair of eyeballs that he was 100% sure had been dug out of some unlucky fellow's eye socket, old Malfoy sneered. "And hasn't its owner already paid the price for it? Does Mr. Malfoy like those eyeballs?" Chun-Ong came out of the inner room. Of course. Everyone saw that he was still Boggin's greasy appearance. Chun-Ong said enthusiastically, "Those are the eyes of the Kaluta tribe. When they are agitated, their pupils turn bright red. If they die now, the red color will never fade." Chapter 765. "I'm not here to buy anything today, Mr. Boggin. I'm here to sell something," old Malfoy hurriedly explained, interrupting Chinang's sales pitch when he saw Decola's eyes light up. "You're here to sell something?" Chin-Ong revealed a look of interest. "So, Mr. Malfoy, what do you want to sell to this shop?" "You should have heard of it. The Ministry of Magic has been conducting a surprise inspection recently," old Malfoy said as he took out a roll of parchment from his bosom. On it were the names of some magical items and raw materials written densely in cursive, and he showed it to Chin-Ong. "I have some collections that are not convenient to sell here. I hope to sell them here. Mr. Boggin, the Ministry of Magic wouldn't have gotten wind of this, would they?" Chin-Ong calmly picked up the parchment and examined it. He even had the spare energy to deal with old Malfoy. "Of course, Mr. Malfoy. I've been staying in the shop today and don't know anything. Don't know." Old Malfoy laughed. "Well said, you don't know anything. I don't think the Ministry of Magic will bother you, right?" "Who knows?" Chin-Ong complained. "They haven't bothered me yet, but I don't know in the future. But no matter what, this has nothing to do with you, Mr. Malfoy. You are a decent person." "Ha ha!" Old Malfoy laughed and even coughed. He panted slightly. "Yes, we have always been decent people, and the Malfoys have some reputation in the magic world. However, the Ministry of Magic is becoming more and more meddlesome. Their appetites are too big. How greedy!" Malfoy's tone contained a hint of anger that could not be suppressed. "These poisons are very good quality." "What is this?" Decola interrupted their conversation and picked up a magic book with a hard cover and a black background. It was engraved with complex and strange magic symbols. Coincidentally, this was the same book that Harry Potter had just picked up. "Ah, you can call it the Dark Bible." Chun-Ong looked at him with interest. "What a fine material." Chun-Ong seemed to be able to see the Malfoy's counterattack scenario that could happen in the future. He enthusiastically explained, "This is a black magic book that records some forbidden magic knowledge. It hides the secrets of how to obtain power over people. Listen to me, this is not an ordinary magic book. If you study it, you'll find that it records the secrets of control and desire, enslavement and control, as well as the secrets of power and domination. This is a book that truly studies how to enslave people. With it, you will always—" "Mr. Malfoy, your son has a unique eye," Chun-Ong praised sincerely. "This book is so ingenious that only the Pink Book can compare to it. Others such as Solomon's 72 Keys, Gates' Necromancy Book, Black Female Bird, Gul'dan's Notes, Abdul's Necromancy Book, Black Book of the Undead, Golden Book of the Sun, Sunfall City's Guide, Lord Xian's 7 Secret Scriptures, Ariela texts, and Thorn Scrolls are far from comparable." Hearing this, Harry felt his blood boil. "I can't let Malfoy get his hands on this evil thing, or tell Dumbledore after he buys it." He focused even more on the gap in the wardrobe, not willing to miss a single detail. "I want my son to stay away from it." Old Malfoy snatched the book from Dracula's hands and threw it back into the pile of books. He also saw a book with a golden cover and ancient Egyptian runes engraved on it. Even though it was just a flash of light, he was sure that he felt the terrifying magic contained in this book. "Mr. Malfoy, are you interested in this golden book of the sun?" Chin Ong introduced. "This is the teachings of the ancient Egyptian sun god Ra. It records the secrets and curses of the Egyptian gods. Legend has it that it has the power to resurrect the dead. It was a supreme treasure passed down from generation to generation by the high priests of ancient Egypt. It took me a lot of effort to deal with their last high priest, Imhotep, to get my hands on it. Enough of that. Bujin, stop your little tricks. There are no gods in this world," old Malfoy said coldly. He seemed to be strict with Dracula, but he was actually very concerned. "Dracula, I've warned you before. You have to be careful with something you don't know. Unless you completely understand it, it's best to be careful with magic items of unknown origin, especially black magic items." Old Malfoy turned to Chinong and said, "Old Bujin, put away your golden book of the sun. Perhaps those stupid muggles will take it seriously, but wizards know that the dead cannot be resurrected. Go and trick those muggles." "No, no, no. Mr. Malfoy, the magic of resurrection exists." Chin Ong shook his head. "This concerns my reputation. I have to make myself clear." He stepped forward and used the key to open the golden book of the sun. The golden pages reflected a moving, holy golden light in the dark magic shop. A warm, tranquil power flowed through the ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs on the pages. Chin Ong spread open the golden book of the sun and tapped the pages with his wand so that everyone could clearly see the mysterious power flowing through the words. "According to my research, the high priests of ancient Egypt could resurrect the dead using the Black Book of the Dead, granting them the power of death and turning them into mummies. But if you use the golden book of the sun as a sacrifice, you can turn a mummy into a living person. A real living person." Old Malfoy said angrily, "I've been to Egypt, and I've seen those so-called mummies clearly. There's nothing special about them. If you're willing to spend a gold coin, you can even take a picture with them. The Egyptian wizards made a lot of money from this. No, not those kinds of mummies." Chin Ong shook his head. "They're real, undead spirits that have returned from the underworld. Bujin, you're willing to say anything to earn money." Old Malfoy said angrily, "Let's get down to business. Do you want these things or not?" "Yes." "Of course, the price must be lower." Chin Ong neatly stated his purchase price while muttering in a low voice, "This is not nonsense. If you can obtain the legendary Stone of Resurrection and use the power of this book to set up a magic ritual, you can really bring people back from the dead. Of course, you'll have to pay a price." "Stop." Old Malfoy interrupted him. "I'll wait for you at the manor tomorrow to transport the goods away." Chapter 766. Chin Ong continued to discuss the price with old Malfoy, but his attention was already on Dracula, who was curiously looking at the junk in the shop and slowly approaching the wardrobe that Potter was hiding in. Dracula seemed to still be thinking about the Dark Bible. He stopped in front of the fallen specimen and read a card stuck on an ornate scepter. He read it out loud. "This is a famous mutated lord called the Weaver of Fate. It was thrown into a dimension called the Well of Eternity by its master, the evil god of chaos, Tsench, and obtained some knowledge about future knowledge and the consequences of madness. There were 81 mutated lords responsible for recording its crazy mutterings, and this is the scepter of one of them. I believe that he left some interesting prophecies on it, which will only be revealed when facing the master of the prophecy." "What is this?" Dracula asked excitedly. "What Tsench?" "What mutated lord?" "I've never heard of them." "Just because you haven't heard of them doesn't mean they don't exist." An indescribable shadow figure appeared in front of Dracula and spoke in a low voice. Its face was not blurry, but it was hard to see it clearly, as if it could not be looked at directly. Dracula turned around nervously. but his father acted as if he did not see anything and was still bargaining with Bujin. "Who are you?" Dracula asked in a low voice. "Do you know who my father is? If you dare hurt me, he is right behind me and will tear you to pieces. All things in this world belong to one. I don't care who your father is," the shadow said. "I am just a key to the door." After saying that, he fell into a long silence. Dracula waited for a while, but when he did not see any reaction, he kicked the ornate scepter in frustration. The eyes on it suddenly opened, and light shone on Dracula. He saw some things in the light: Dumbledore, who had fallen from the tower, his father, who was crawling at the feet of a strange man without a nose, and the death of Harry Potter, whom he hated the most, and many familiar classmates who were looking at a platinum-haired boy with fear and hatred. When he turned around, Dracula was shocked to see a familiar face, as if he had grown up. In the distorted light and shadow, on another path, he saw Harry Potter holding his wand and casting a death curse at Dumbledore. He saw Harry Potter taking off the ring on Dumbledore's finger and fiddling with the black gem on it. He saw his godfather, Snape, with tears in his eyes, bowing to Harry Potter and excitedly opening a golden magic book for him. It was the Golden Sun scripture. What scared Dracula the most was that he saw his own corpse at Harry Potter's feet. His heart was beating so fast that he let out a loud cry. When he got out of the illusion, the scepter was right in front of him. It was as if everything that had happened before was just an illusion. "Dracula, what's wrong?" His father turned around and asked. "No, nothing." Dracula instinctively did not want to tell his father about this, so he lied. "I was just scared by it." He pointed to the fallen specimen. "It says that it will resurrect when it encounters a wizard." Dracula added, afraid of being exposed. "Dracula, I hope you are stronger than a girl. Your grades are no longer as good as a girl from a Muggle family. At least you should be braver than her, even though she is a Gryffindor." Then old Malfoy sneered at Chenong. "You shouldn't have written such a ridiculous rumor, as if it was true. Bujin, the last time I came here, you didn't have these messy things in your shop. At that time, you were a reliable and honest black magic material merchant. This is the reason why I often trade with you. I can guarantee that all my goods are honest and reliable. In Knockout Alley, you might not be able to find another shop owner who is as honest and practical as I am. My shop is filled with all kinds of magical items. That fallen specimen is one of a kind, and the markings on it are correct. If it encounters a fallen sorcerer, then it might really be resurrected." While Chenong was arguing with old Malfoy, Dracula had gradually calmed down. He recalled the voices he had heard in the illusion. Those Death Eaters actually bowed at Harry Potter's feet in awe. What were they shouting? The Dark Devil. They actually called Harry Potter the Dark Devil. Malfoy, Dracula felt a strong sense of jealousy and anger. How dare they call Harry Potter that? That good-for-nothing. Apart from an ugly scar, he knows nothing. How can he be worthy of this honorific? This should belong to me. Malfoy, Dracula made up his mind. He could not let such a terrible thing happen. Harry Potter saw Malfoy's twisted and disgusted expression from the wardrobe. He heard Malfoy muttering to himself, "Was what I saw just a prophecy? I can't let it happen. Harry Potter does not deserve to sit in that position, even though he killed Dumbledore." "I killed Dumbledore?" In the wardrobe, Harry was shocked beyond words. What kind of nonsense is Malfoy thinking? Harry saw Dracula's sneaking glances at the golden magic book, his eyes full of suspicion. He whispered so softly that only Harry, who was hiding in the wardrobe, could hear him clearly. "That Golden Sun scripture and Dumbledore's ring, is that the Life Stone? If that's the case, then did Harry Potter really find the secret to resurrection? Then how did he know?" Dracula frowned. How did he get his hands on this book? Harry could not help but hold his breath when he heard the word resurrection. His ears did not miss a single word that Dracula said. But Dracula had already discovered the wardrobe. His eyes were filled with hesitation and horror. He muttered to himself, "Unless he's here right now." Hearing this, Harry's heart almost stopped. He almost suffocated as he watched Malfoy's hand slowly reach for the wardrobe's handle. But at that moment, old Malfoy shouted from the other end of the counter, "Dracula, come here!" Dracula flashed a smile that Harry was familiar with. It was arrogant and disgusting. He said, "I must be crazy to think that arrogant Potter is still at his disgusting uncle's house. He can't even eat. How could he come to Knockover Alley?" Dracula turned around and walked away. Harry wiped the non-existent sweat off his forehead. At this moment, he suddenly felt that the wardrobe was very cold as the coldest winter. The cold air was coming from the dense coat behind him, which made Harry a little curious. On the other side, Dracula was pestering old Malfoy to buy the magic book made of gold, but Chinong offered a sky-high price. "Are you crazy? Borgin, I can buy your whole shop with that money." Malfoy said angrily. Chinong insisted, "It's worth that much? It's a magic item made of magical gold, and it has the unparalleled power of resurrection. This is already a bargain." Chapter 767. The moment the door closed, Chin Ang's attitude became obviously perfunctory. He said in a low voice, "Old Malfoy spat out a lot of things under Dumbledore's pressure, but I know you've hidden at least half of it. The legendary sacred relic of death, the old wand in Dumbledore's hands, the invisibility cloak passed down through the generations of the Potter family, and the life stone that disappeared without a trace. Could the life stone be in Voldemort's hands? What exactly is Dumbledore plotting?" Harry watched as Borgin muttered under his breath as he walked into the back room. To prevent Borgin from suddenly turning back, Harry held his breath and stayed in the wardrobe for a few more minutes. When he was sure Borgin wouldn't come out soon, he quietly slipped out of the wardrobe. He saw the golden sutra of the sun lying unguarded on the counter, but Borgin seemed to have taken the key with him. Looking at the magic book in the dark room, which exuded a peaceful and warm aura of light, the pages of the book that reflected light under the soothing aura of magic seemed to evoke the greediest desires in one's heart, striking at the weakest part of human nature. Harry had intended to leave just like that, but in that nostalgic warmth he could not help but stop for a long time. He quietly stood where he was, not making a sound. As he guessed, Harry gently picked up the magic book. He did not see the strange key, which seemed to have been taken away by Bujin. But it did not matter because the book was open. Harry placed it horizontally into his robe, and the loose robe could easily accommodate the large magic book. The golden pages pressed tightly against his lower abdomen. Like a frightened quail, Harry hunched his body, trying to make the outline of the book less obvious in his robe. Then he quickly passed through the glass display window and out the door of the shop. Holding the broken glasses tightly to his face, he looked around. He seemed to be in a dark, damp back alley. On both sides of the alley were glass display windows with dried human skulls and bones, spiders and toads. They seemed to be shops for dark magic. He looked up at the sign of the shop he had just walked out of. It read, "Bujin Burke Dark Magic Supply Shop." When Harry saw two shabbily dressed wizards pointing at him from the doorway, he was so nervous that he almost suffocated. He had a strong urge to pull out his wand and give them a heads up, but he suppressed it with great willpower. "Dear little friend, are you lost?" A strangely sharp sound, like a cat's paw scratching on glass, rang in Harry's ears, making him almost jump. Harry looked back to see an old, ugly witch dragging a tray full of human fingernails. Her face was wrinkled like a moldy orange, and she grinned, revealing sharp green teeth. Harry ran without looking back. He hugged the magic book in his arms and ran along the winding path of Knockover Alley. When he was about to exit the alley, he bumped into a tall figure. Harry quickly turned his head, and his heart almost jumped out of his chest. He did not greet the familiar figure and ran into the crowd at Diagon Alley without looking back. Hagrid, did not react for a moment. He looked at Harry's back and exclaimed, "Harry?" The rabbit-like figure trembled and ran even faster. Squeezing back and forth, it disappeared into the crowd. Hagrid did not know what happened, and he was not even sure that the figure was Harry's. But out of concern for Harry, he still chased after the figure, but by this time Harry had already disappeared. On the second floor of Birkenberg's magic shop, Chin-Ong watched everything calmly. He smiled and said in a low voice, "The prophesied savior, the child who is on the right track, I am neither good nor evil towards this world. I only hope that you have more choices. Dumbledore, manipulating a person's life is one of the greatest evils. If a person's universal love is as pure as Dumbledore's in a certain sense, it is also very scary. The Jedi Masters believe that the brighter and purer a person's light is, the deeper and more extreme his dark side is. To a certain extent, Dumbledore is only a step away from being the most evil, dark devil in history. When he firmly believes that his actions are for the good of everyone and ignores the choices of others, then the world of magic will welcome the most terrifying dark devil in history, Dumbledore. Fate has split into two paths before my eyes. One path leads to Hogwarts Castle in the flames. The sleeping dragon has awakened, and the whole world of magic is shrouded in Dumbledore's shadow. Extreme kindness and love not only burn the people around Dumbledore, but also torment Dumbledore himself. In order to destroy evil, kindness must be sacrificed, and the purest are often the first to suffer. Voldemort's resurrection is not scary, but what is scary is that he will die in your hands. Dumbledore, the other path leads to the dark abyss, and the one closest to Voldemort is the one who is destined to end him. The research of Muggle criminal psychologists is not just empty talk. Childhood trauma has a lasting effect. No matter how cheerful a person is on the outside, there is bound to be a twisted side in the depths of their hearts. Dumbledore would never be able to imagine how cruel the Dursley family's child had to go through as he grew up. To a certain extent, Harry Potter, who carries Voldemort's soul fragment and has similar experiences, is the one who is most influenced by Voldemort, and is the one who is most similar to Tom Riddle. The moment he ends Voldemort, it could be the moment he walks towards the light and the ordinary, or it could be the moment he picks up the old magic wand that symbolizes power. Fate is so mysterious. This Golden Sun Sutra is my gift to all of you to fulfill the regrets in your hearts, to reverse the cruel fate of the past. It is also to tempt you, to make you face the greatest persecution of the dark abyss. Harry Potter, Snape, Dumbledore, everyone has made mistakes that they want to redeem. Now, I'm giving this opportunity to all of you, but when I place this opportunity to redeem my regrets in their hands, it often only pushes them deeper into the dark abyss. According to my prophecy, when I place this symbol of hope in your hands, these two paths that lead to darkness and the dark abyss will become the greatest possibilities in the future. Unless someone can take over the position of Voldemort, who is gradually losing his strength and can no longer threaten you, and become the new Black Devil King. Otherwise, the day you defeat Voldemort will be the day you break all ties, and one of you will take over the old magic wand and become the Black Devil King. For the peace of the world, for the future of the magic world, I, Chin-Ong, have decided to become the Black Devil King and stop this future that makes you feel despair. Kindness is only more precious when it is set off by evil, and justice is only shown when it is needed. The appearance of the Black Devil King is definitely not because of one person's depravity and distortion, but because of the eruption of the conflict at the bottom of the magic world, a life and death struggle between purebloods and mixed bloods. The magic world needs a revolution, a complete purge. This is the mission of the third Black Devil King. Chapter 768. When Gru returned, he saw Chin-Ong reading a black leather notebook covered in copper. There was a name pasted on the leather cover, Tom Marvolo. Marvolo Riddle, Tom Marvolo Riddle, was so engrossed that he did not even lift his head when Gollum arrived. Chun Ang's fingertips flickered with the blue light of arcane energy. As his index finger moved across the pages, he analyzed the delicate magic structures and soul fragments. Different from the magic in this world, the arcana that Chinong learned and used was a power with perfect internal logic and a strict system. Its energy was conserved and stable, and the rules of arcana operated according to order. On the Faerun continent, arcanists could use arcana to extract power from the 4 major elemental planes and the 8 derivative elemental planes. They had even created the magic net, a creation that extracted arcana energy from countless planes rich in energy. Although he had already left the multiverse where the Faerun continent was located and came to a universe without elemental planes, it was not difficult for Chinong to extract arcana energy from the dark planes of this universe with his arcana level. In the study of arcana spells, planes were an exquisite spatial concept. It was a kind of analysis and positioning of space by the grand arcanists. Although planes had theories based on the special laws of the multiverse where Faerun was located, there was also a general analysis of space in the universe. Chun Ong combined the knowledge that the mages in the Marvel world opened dimensions and obtained the energy to cast magic. He combined it with Faerun's arcanist system and improved the source of arcana to obtain energy. When he first entered this universe, he had anchored some of the lower latitudes through some measurements of the universal constants. He had locked onto some planes that did not have the concept of time in those complicated and infinite dimensional spaces. Through these planes, Chinong could use the vacuum motion in the universe that fluctuated with Planck time to obtain endless safe energy. Other than that, he could also extract matter and mass from some planes of dark matter. He could even lock onto the spatial structure formed by the gravitational distortion of some massive stars, fire-like planes of elements, and extract energy and matter from them. This was the great power of the Grand Arcanists, as well as the macroscopic application of space, energy, and information cosmology. While the wizards of this world were still extracting the magic power in their blood and achieving some chaotic and disorderly results through magic that was essentially chaotic, Chinong had already pried open the ocean of vacuum energy of the entire universe through the low-latitude dark plane and had boundless arcana power to squander. In particular, Chinong had recently built the Well of Eternity's vacuum zero-point energy plane absorption structure, which had increased the efficiency of energy mobilization to the stellar level. As Chun Ang's research developed and his understanding of the structure of space in this universe deepened, the energy he could use would only become more and more powerful, and the arcana he could achieve would only become more and more terrible. This was the reason why he was able to remain calm. Now that the Well of Eternity's arcane creation was about to be completed, there was enough energy to weave a magic net that covered the entire Earth that contained level 9 spells. It's time to do something practical, Chinong thought. He put down Voldemort's soul vessel. He now had a deep understanding of the madness and stupidity of the Dark Demon King. Putting aside how unreliable this method of splitting one's soul to achieve immortality was, placing this soul fragment in front of any great arcanist was tantamount to exposing one's everything. In the East, immortal cultivators guarded their names, birthdays, hair, and blood as if they were their lifeblood, while arcanists did their best to hide their real names in an attempt to deceive the gods. How stupid would one have to be to entrust one's reincarnation fragment to an ordinary magic notebook? The liches would love to use the indestructible supreme divine artifact to create their own soul box, and then banish the soul box to the astral plane and bury it in the outer plane, never to be found. A black devil king who was filled with hatred and whose subordinates all had ulterior motives had actually entrusted his soul fragment to a subordinate who had never been a loyal subject. It was the most foolish act in any world of magic. Why not bury it in concrete and sink it into a trench in the Pacific Ocean? Chin Ong, who had been toying with Voldemort's soul for a long time and wantonly flipping through the memories in his soul fragment, never once saw the Black Devil as some sort of obstacle. This villain boss was destined to be doomed if Chen Ong cursed his soul fragment, So how could Chenong take it seriously? And this soul vessel, which was related to Voldemort's life, was obtained by Chenong with a modified incantation on old Malfoy. Would you believe it if I told you that? A lich left his own soul box to his subordinates, placed it in the enemy's base, placed it in the treasury, placed it in his defenseless old house, and finally placed it carefully only to have it stolen by a subordinate who went along with him. It was the enemy himself. In the long history of his reading, Chenong had never seen such a stupid lich. This was a negative example of how a lich protects his soul box, making all the stupidest mistakes possible, except for the last point, which was quite creative. Seeing Chenong close the magic book in his hands with a long sigh, Gru finally had time to ask for Chin-Ang's instructions. Master, the relevant materials have been prepared. I've already caught a Death Eater with the Black Devil mark, and I've also obtained the map of Azkaban, although the Magic Execution Department has placed it on a small, magically protected island in the cold waters of the North Sea. But this is not enough to trouble the Great Master. Now we just need something to deal with the Soul Eaters. Ignore the Soul Eaters. Let's go to Azkaban now. Chenong picked up another black leather book beside him and laughed softly at Gru. In regards to the origin of black magic to create soul vessels, some ancient wizards have proposed an interesting possibility. In ancient Egypt, the god of strength, Seth, murdered his brother Osiris, and Osiris' son, Horus, devoted himself to avenging his father. In the end, under the judgment of the gods, Horus and Seth divided Egypt into two parts, Upper Egypt and Lower Egypt. And Horus' father, the god of the underworld, Osiris, was dismembered by Seth. In the end, Horus collected most of Osiris' remains. Only one piece was swallowed by a crocodile, and its whereabouts were unknown. However, Osiris was resurrected with the help of Anubis. Many ancient wizards believe that this is the origin of soul vessels. Chenong picked up the black metal book and said softly, "The black magic to create soul vessels retains the knowledge of Osiris' immortality, but it lacks the knowledge and power of Osiris' resurrection, not to mention the secret that later made Osiris the god of the underworld. And aren't Voldemort's loyal followers pursuing the former?" Chenong smiled. "Resurrecting Voldemort as a mummy. I know they found an ancient resurrection spell, the flesh of servants, the bones of their ancestors, and the blood of their enemies." Gru trembled at the side as he listened to Chenong continue. Everything they pursued was in this book, the Black Scripture of the Dead, which recorded all of Anubis's secrets and power. It was Anubis who resurrected Osiris, and it was Anubis who gave up the position of god of the underworld to Osiris. Everything that Voldemort pursued his entire life was in here. Of course, if he wanted to obtain eternal life, in addition to this Black Scripture of the Dead, he would also need the Golden Sun Scripture. If this scripture fell into Dumbledore's hands, he would be able to easily use the soul vessels to kill all of Voldemort's soul fragments. If Voldemort obtained this book, he would be able to resurrect in an even more powerful state, becoming a demigod mummy, eliminating all the future troubles of having his soul split. This Black Scripture of the Dead has extremely powerful black magic power. Anyone who obtains it will have the opportunity to become even more powerful than Voldemort. Gru stared blankly at the metal book in Chenong's hands, his eyes filled with passion and desire. He said timidly, "Master, apart from you, who else is worthy of such great power? This book should naturally be yours." Chapter 769. Chenong stood on the bow of a sailboat in the open sea of the North Atlantic Ocean near Norway. The deck under his feet was soaked black by the seawater. A large number of shells and barnacles were parasitic on the ship's body. There were some holes in the decaying hull, and the sails that were flapping in the wind were riddled with holes. The sailboat was mysterious and quiet in the thick sea fog. It was a ghost ship, unlike the ghost ships and ship monsters that were commonly seen in the magic world. Chin-Ang's ship was a ghost ship that had been resurrected by himself. He had used magic to raise a sunken 16th century Spanish galleon in the English Channel, manipulating arcane energy to transform and revive it. He had used some of the magic from the Pharaon arcane system to create ghost ships. Although it lacked the negative energy plane as the source of the transformation, this ghost ship did not live up to its name. However, after turning the resentment of the dead sailors on the sunken ship into the spirit of the ship, it looked like a ghost ship. According to the ship's name, it should be the Spanish Invincible Fleet of the English Channel War of 1588, the Santa Felipe. According to the records, this galleon was one of the main warships of the Portuguese fleet led by the Spanish commander Recalde. On the 8th of August, 1588, after a battle with the English fleet near Gravelines, it hit a reef and sank in a storm. The ship had a displacement of about 800 tons and a total of 40 cannons. When it sank, it carried about 415 soldiers and 117 sailors. Most of these people did not manage to escape from the sunken Santa Felipe, and in the end, turned into ghosts that haunted the ship. After the ghost ship woke up, it greedily devoured the ghosts of the drowned sailors in the sea. Its planks were like the body of a living creature, wriggling to repair the broken hull of the ship over the years. Under the infusion and activation of Chin Ang's powerful arcane energy, the hull of the ship changed. The strong arcane energy made the hull unusually tough. The 40 cannons on the ship merged with the hull and were transformed into life constructs. The only way to reach Azkaban was by land or sea. In order to ensure that no one could escape from this prison, the Ministry of Magic did not build a network of airplanes on this island. Instead, they used a powerful magic to hide the island and forbade people from using phantom shift in Azkaban. For most of the 50s, the only way to reach this island was to be captured by the Auror, but this didn't mean that Azkaban was invulnerable. Otherwise, the big prison break in 1996 and the escape of Sirius wouldn't have happened in the future. It was very tight to outsiders, but for the prisoners inside, there were many loopholes. Master Gru trembled as it prostrated itself at Chun Ang's feet. Azkaban has been cast with a powerful loyalty curse. Other than the Ministry of Magic's secret guards, no one can find it. It has a total of 5 confidential people, apart from the public director of the Magic Execution Division. The identities of the other 4 are strictly confidential, but I still found out the identity of one of them. Master, let me bring him here. Gru screamed. Chin Ong only laughed softly after hearing this. No need. I asked you to find the former Death Eater. Have you found him? Gru prostrated itself at his feet and said in awe, I found him. Master, I'll bring him here now. After saying this, Gru took 2 or 3 steps back. After leaving Chin Ang's sight, it used phantom shift and disappeared into thin air. After a while, it dragged over a man with filthy hair that looked like a homeless man. The man lay in front of Chinong and looked like he wanted to vomit. Gru screamed, You dirty mudspawn! How dare you be so presumptuous in front of Master? If you dirty the deck in front of Master, I'll cut your heart and bones until you die. The man heard Gru's threat and shuddered. He looked up and saw Gru's current appearance. His eyes immediately widened and he stammered, Mr. Bujin, how did you? He looked up and saw Chinong. He was even more confused. Mr. Bujin, so you're here. Can you give me the 20 gold coins you promised me? Gru respectfully introduced the man to Chinong. Master, this is Adonis Selwyn. His family are pure-blood supporters of Voldemort. However, even among the Death Eaters, he was the one who was looked down upon. Before he was 10, he was almost a squib. His brother, Selwyn, a loyal follower of Voldemort, even wanted to strangle him to death. However, when he was about to suffocate, he produced a small magic riot. Because of this, he was recognized by the Selwyn family. However, his magic was extremely weak, and he was widely ridiculed among the Death Eaters. But because of this, he escaped the punishment of the Ministry of Magic. The wizards believed that even if he wanted to do evil, He would not be able to do it with his magic power and the level of magic spells. But even though he was a half-squib, Adonis still had a cruel heart. I know that he secretly hunted down muggles who were powerless to resist, because he believed that those black magic rituals could make his magic power stronger. He did many evil things, but he was never suspected by the Ministry of Magic. Adonis trembled under Qin-Ang's cold and calm gaze. He gathered his courage and said to Qin-Ang, "Mr. Boijin, what do you want me to do? As long as you pay me, I can do anything for you." "No, I don't need you to do anything." Qin-Ang shook his head indifferently. He reached out and stripped Boijin's true name from his body, temporarily giving it to Gru. As Gru convulsed violently, it reverted to Boijin Bork's appearance. At the same time, Adonis saw Qin-Ang's true appearance. That Asian appearance was very eye-catching. Qin-Ang absorbed the arcane energy from the Well of Eternity. In the void, energy tides that Adonis could not see surged towards him. Following Qin-Ang's arcane magic, Qin-Ang opened the coordinates to the Faerun universe for him. A ray of starlight crossed the multiverse and landed on Qin-Ang's body, turning into a black robe. Qin-Ang obtained the true name he wanted from another multiverse. Although his face did not change, in everyone's eyes, he was already a different person. "My name is Darth Morgoth." So said Darth Aeon Chin Morgoth. Morgoth lightly pointed in Adonis's direction, and an intense magical aura drowned the man. A magic mark of a snake entrenched under a skull was extracted from the flesh that had been devoured by the specter ship. Qin-Ang kept the black magic mark and used it to cast an arcane spell from the School of Prophecy. In the midst of magic, Azkaban's position was clearly determined. What does Azkaban have the most? Qin-Ang turned to Boijin and asked. Boijin, who had already returned to his human form, did not change his servile nature. He smiled obsequiously and said, "It should be the Soul Eaters, but you can't catch the Soul Eaters. Otherwise, I could also use this arcane spell to locate Azkaban." Boijin knew that Qin-Ang was expressing his dissatisfaction with the progress of his acquisition of the mystical animals. His forehead was immediately drenched in sweat, and his body was trembling slightly. His face was full of fear. Fortunately, other than the Soul Eaters, Azkaban has the most Death Eaters, and Voldemort likes to put magic marks on his believers. This way he can know where they are, control their thoughts, steal the memories in their heads, and even control their lives. But through this, the dark demon mark floated on Qin-Ang's fingertips. What Voldemort can do, I can do too. Qin-Ang took out his new wand. It was a wand made of sea willow and dragon heartstrings. Qin-Ang had made it in passing when he was making the specter ship. He did not need a wand, but as a reserve dark demon king, it would be too conspicuous if he did not prepare a wand. So he made this well-behaved and loyal wand. Sea willow was black coral, not a type of wood. It did not have the ability to channel magic like wood did. However, Qin-Ang appreciated the feel of it. Although it was difficult, he still used arcane spells to modify the material, making it more compatible with magic. Qin-Ang tapped his wand slightly, and a winged dragon flew out of it. It landed on Boijin's right arm, and accompanied by a burning pain, Boijin pulled back his sleeve. He saw a scarlet dragon spread its wings and coiled on his right arm. Through this tattoo, he could sense a vast energy source like the mouth of a well beside the moon in outer space. Powerful arcane energy condensed into a high-density form like well water and lingered in the arcane well. An endless stream of arcane energy flowed from the tattoo, giving Boijin waves of pleasure. Arcane energy could easily be converted into magic, nourishing his bloodline. It was a powerful feeling, and Boijin was intoxicated by the flow of this power. He greedily wanted to absorb more, but after reaching a certain point, he was blocked by an invisible restriction. "This is my arcane mark. You can call it Milko Star. Not only can this mark contact me at any time, but it will also convey my orders at any time. At the same time, it is also a beacon that allows you to receive the arcane radiation from the well of eternity and borrow its power. However, there are 9 levels of authority in the well of eternity, and I am only giving you the first level. Do you want more power? Then pray for my blessing. However, this blessing can become a punishment at any time. If you do not satisfy me, then the radiation from the well of eternity will no longer be pure arcane energy. Instead, it will be like maggots in your bones, a curse that will cause you extreme pain. From now on, you will call me Morgoth. This name has an extremely powerful magic that allows you to borrow a bit of my power. At the same time, anyone who says this name will fall into my eyes. Any words that contain this name will fall into my ears, and you will even be under my protection. After you say this name, your communication with each other will be under my protection. It will not fall into the ears of anyone who is not favored by me. Anyone who says this name will be rewarded and cursed by me. If you say this name in the midst of fire, you will not be harmed by the fire. If you say this name in the water, you will not be suffocated by the water. If you say this name in the presence of weapons, the sharp blades will not be able to touch you. If you say this name under the influence of a curse, you will not have any fate with death. This is my protection curse for you. Chapter 770. The ghost ship moved forward in the thick fog. The dark magic mark floated above the bow of the ship, emitting a green glow to guide the ship. Around them was a thick curtain of sea fog. Gollum finally stood on the deck as Bujin. He still had the dignity of a house elf, but to others he had regained the appearance of a wizard. This made him look like a house elf with a fawning and subservient expression and Bujin's body. It looked a little awkward. After Chin-Ong maliciously transformed him into a house elf, the ancient wizard's contract spell and curse had permanently destroyed a part of his knowledge. Chin-Ong was extremely interested in this kind of magic and had been collecting data related to Gollum. The dark magic mark of the snake under the skull was emitting a stronger and more stable green light, which meant that they were getting closer to Azkaban. Gollum reported to Chin-Ong in a low voice what he knew about Azkaban. There are actually very few auras stationed there. The Ministry of Magic once stipulated that at least a squad of auras must be stationed there, but later the auras strongly protested. They did not want to stay with the Soul Eaters, and they did not want to be stationed in a place without a flying network, where even owls do not come. You see through everything, Master. The auras are only afraid of the boredom and hard work. Ever since the Fairy Rebellion, there are fewer and fewer wizards who can bear the loneliness and boredom. They are even afraid of staying with the Soul Eaters, and regard guarding Azkaban as a chore. In the end, the Ministry of Magic symbolically arranged for 2 people to be stationed here. One is an old aura who is about to die, and the other is often absent, handing over the most dangerous prison of the Ministry of Magic to a group of greedy black magic creatures that want to suck human souls without any supervision. Chin-Ong sneered. Which genius came up with the idea of letting black magic creatures guard the dark sorcerers? Was it because they were afraid that they would not collude? For the group of officials in the Ministry of Magic, I'm afraid they think the Soul Eaters are more reliable than the auras. Gollum mocked. Soul Eaters naturally hate all humans and wizards. They suck human life and happiness, and hate all creatures that are not them. Many famous light wizards have proposed to exterminate these black magic creatures, but the Soul Eater's office under the Ministry of Magic's Magical Animal Control Department strongly opposed it. They claim to respect the survival rights and cultural customs of the Soul Eaters, and give them the freedom to live according to their own way of life. This proposal received the approval of many magical animal protection experts. They proposed racial equality and gave the Soul Eaters the rights of humans. Ever since the 14th century, the president of the Wizard Parliament, Burdock Malden, held a summit meeting among the races of the magic world and tried to grant human rights to the dodging bird, fop, elves, fairies, foxes, and trolls. Since then, the Ministry of Magic has been in chaos over this issue. It was not until 1811 that the new Minister of Magic, Grogenstump, issued an order to define human as any creature that has enough intelligence to understand the laws of the magic society and bear part of the responsibility in the process of making these laws. According to this definition, under the efforts of the Soul Eater's Office of the Ministry of Magic, our Soul Eaters actually obtained human rights. It's worth mentioning that the centaurs and murlocs who were truly recognized as humans later voluntarily withdrew from the ranks of humans and chose to be magical animals. This may have something to do with the protection of magical animals. After all, there are many magical animal reserves, such as the Forbidden Forest and Atlantis, where only magical animals are allowed to live. From then on, the rights of the Soul Eaters were protected by the Ministry of Magic, and every wizard was required to respect their right to absorb human souls. In order to better use the power of the Soul Eaters to serve the Ministry of Magic, a genius minister of the Ministry of Magic proposed to let them guard Azkaban. This not only respected the rights of the Soul Eaters, but also did not violate the safety of the wizards. This genius proposal caused the average lifespan of the prisoners in Azkaban to never exceed 10 years. Chin-Ong lamented, "So that's how it is. I didn't know there was such a strange story in the world of magic. The wizards actually didn't let the Soul Eaters receive education and obtain the right to enter Hogwarts to study. They are really discriminating against them. When I become the headmaster of Hogwarts, I will definitely apply to the Ministry of Magic to specially recruit the Soul Eaters and other human-like races that can't enjoy the treatment of wizards. I want to add a Soul Eaters Academy and possibly a Vampire Academy, so that these vulnerable groups and special races can enjoy their rights. Also, humans who can use magic are called wizards. But these races that have obtained the rights of humans don't have an equivalent status. I think we should call them minority races with special rights, or minority races for short. How about that? And for the minority races like the Soul Eaters who have special lifestyles and magical bloodlines, they should be treated even more specially. In order to show this special benefit, we should call them God Race, so that the wizards know the importance of this." Chin-Ong said this sarcastically and turned his head in the direction of the bow of the ship. There came the sound of waves hitting the reef. Looking at the corner of the dark gray reef that was exposed in the thick fog, everyone knew that the most feared and taboo topic in the world of magic, Azkaban, was right in front of them. Chin-Ong took out the wand in his arms and whispered, "For this, I will grant them equal rights to die and be experimented on." The Spectre ship took a big turn in the deep water port before it found the port to dock. As soon as Chin-Ong stepped on the dock, the surrounding fog receded like the tide, and the blue sky appeared in the sky. The whole island was clearly visible in front of Chin-Ang's eyes. It was as if he had crossed two worlds with just one step. In the distance, there was a castle-like building with a creepy silence, a figure like a small gray that walked towards Chin-Ong from afar. He carried a broken lantern and stumbled on the small path. It was a very old wizard. He was wearing a tattered gray robe, and his mind was not clear. He shouted at Chin-Ong and the others from afar, "Muggles, this is not a place for you to be. Damn, the curse cast by the Ministry of Magic has gone wrong again. Are they only protecting Merlin's boots?" Chin-Ong ignored him and quietly walked towards Azkaban. The old Auror took out a moldy twig, like wand from his arms, and pointed it at Chin-Ong with a trembling hand, as if he wanted to cast a forget-everything spell on him. But how could Gru, who was following closely behind Chin-Ong, not react? He subdued the old wizard with a disarm spell. Chapter 771. What an exquisite concealing spell! Chin-Ong exclaimed. The sunlight shone on Chin-Ang's fingertips, which were in contact with the door of the castle, and a long shadow was projected on the door of the castle. Chin-Ang's palm gradually became parallel to the door of the castle. The shadow of his hand stretched out from the door, and when his hand reached into the door, the shadow of his hand stretched out from the door and intersected with his fingers. Chin-Ong flipped his hand and switched places with his own shadow. In front of him, the whole world suddenly turned upside down. The shadow of the island where Azkaban was suddenly became three-dimensional, and the sunny island instantly turned into a shadow. Heavy rain poured down from Chin-Ang's head, and the wind raged wantonly. Chin-Ong was on a small island that could only be called a reef. He looked back, but did not see any trace of the specter ship he was on. What appeared in front of him now was the real Azkaban. It was hidden by an ancient concealing spell on an isolated island in the North Sea. Someone had used a spell to divide the space here into two worlds. The one in the fog seemed to be protected by the spell, but it was only the Azkaban of the surface world. Only through the shadow could one enter the real Azkaban. A short shadow appeared under Chin-Ang's feet, and Gru walked out from the shadow. This island was astonishingly small, and the entire castle occupied 90% of its land. The shape of Azkaban was a triangular tower. A corner of the tower's front had collapsed, and the Soul Eaters were flying above it. Huge waves crashed against the base of the tower, and it seemed that this place was always in a violent storm. The waves slapped against the reef under Chin-Ang's feet, and the splashing waves splashed behind Chin-Ong. The Soul Eaters dancing in the wind found traces of Chin-Ong, and they whistled. This was the sound of the wind, and the Soul Eaters themselves did not make any sound. Chin-Ong could only smell the stench of decay and death brought by the seawater. He saw these black-robed monsters, their black robes fluttering in the wind. Their hollow bodies were wrapped in black cloth, and they swooped down towards Chin-Ong Gru, who was behind Chin-Ong, had already pulled out his wand nervously. At the tip of his wand, a sparkling white light had already begun to flicker. I didn't expect a dark magus like Bujin to know how to call for God's protection. Chin-Ong thought calmly, and then he activated the true name that Morgoth had given him. At this time, the existence known as Chin-Ong gradually shrunk back into his soul, and the external body that belonged to Morgoth replaced Chin-Ong. At this time, a figure that was about 3 times the height of a normal person appeared where Chin-Ong had disappeared. His face was hidden in the darkness, and only a pair of eyes that shone like raging flames were as bright as fire in the darkness. The Soul Eaters that swooped down towards Chin-Ong saw that pair of eyes, and they all let out roars that sounded like the vibration of their decaying vocal cords. In the midst of the storm, the black-robed Soul Eaters that looked straight into the eyes let out the last and first roar of their lives, and turned into a handful of black ashes in the wind and rain. The ashes were swept away by the storm in the blink of an eye. In the area enveloped by Morgoth's power, it was as if the surrounding light was slowly fading away. The Soul Eaters lost their power and had no choice but to descend. Their black robes became powerless and soaked, and they drooped on the ground. Morgoth absorbed their power and souls as easily as darkness. Gru became smaller and smaller in front of Chin-Ong, who had transformed into Morgoth. He crawled on the ground in fear because he felt that the figure in front of him was the source of all evil and darkness. The evil power that the Soul Eaters were proud of was as tender as a baby and as humble as a servant in front of him. So much so that Morgoth did not need much strength to easily enslave their souls. He wrapped his own power around their bodies, and intense pain of eroding their souls made the Soul Eaters struggle continuously. However, they could not resist such dark power. More Soul Eaters rushed out of the triangular Tower of Azkaban. They gathered together, like a black tide surging out of Azkaban. These prison guards tumbled in the sky, swooped down, and then fell one by one, forming a puddle on the surface of the sea. Their soaked black robes tangled in the seawater. Bujin watched as the most terrifying evil creatures in the stories of the wizards wailed at the feet of Chin-Ong. They did not make a sound, but their invisible bodies under the black robes twisted and trembled, appropriately expressing their fear and pain. Morgoth's figure turned back to look at them. He stretched out his inhuman hands that seemed to be condensed from darkness and pushed open the door of Azkaban. The inside of the prison was dark and damp, and the space for people to walk in was extremely narrow. Morgatha's figure gradually faded, and the black fog slowly dispersed. The figure inside also returned to normal. He walked into Azkaban. As he moved forward, the darkness inside instantly expanded the space. The ground was damp and rotten. Some lobas and carnivorous slugs were wriggling on the stone floor of the tunnel, and some mottled rays were breeding. When they were not moving, they looked like a faintly green fungus with eyes. There were also a few hairy crabs that made their homes in the dark corners of the walls. These magical creatures usually had very strong vitality, and sometimes the wizards had to use special potions to get rid of them. But as Morgoth gradually approached, a deep, dark power gradually shrouded the space. The bodies of these tenacious little creatures gradually withered and died. Their vitality disappeared in the darkness. The darkness that once protected them, at this moment, took their lives. Rabastan Lestrange was playing with a toad. This was the only game he had been able to vent the madness and despair in his heart since he had been imprisoned. The riot of the Dementors just now had attracted the attention of most of the prisoners, but Rabastan just shouted, "It's most likely those mudbloods from the Ministry of Magic making trouble again. I really hope that the Dementors can suck their dirty souls dry." Rabastan was dirty all over in the prison. Under his messy black hair, his face was pale and thin. After shouting a few words, Rabastan wisely shut his mouth, because his most feared sister-in-law, Bellatrix Lestrange, was screaming frantically, "It's him! It's Lord Voldemort! He's here to save us!" I knew that Lord Voldemort may have lost temporarily, but he will never lose to those mudbloods. Rabastan, who lowered his head again, was surprised to see that the toad in his hand had lost its life. It was as if something in the darkness was absorbing its vitality. The body of this fragile little creature withered into a piece of skin. Rabastan felt that the darkness around him seemed to be much thicker, and an inexplicable coldness enveloped his body. In his already exhausted body, traces of energy were clearly fading. Rabastan felt as if he couldn't breathe. His mind was blank, and the warmth between his mouth and nose was being sucked away by the darkness. A numbness, different from the Dementor's kiss, gradually took control of him. On the outside, his skin was so pale that the blue-black blood vessels underneath could be seen. In his blurred vision, when he was suffocating, Rabastan, who was leaning against the fence, saw an indescribable figure coming from the side. Chapter 772. Rabastan. Rabastan Lestrange's brother, Rodolphus Lestrange, noticed that something was wrong with him. From his angle, he could see the side of Labastan's face sticking out of the bars. His face was deathly pale, and his eyes had completely lost focus, as if there was an indescribable fear dominating his mind. Rodolphus Lestrange shouted loudly, "Rabastan!" However, he realized that his brother did not respond to the sounds from the outside world. The liveliness of a human seemed to be leaving this body, taking away the last bit of warmth from this cold and dead Death Eater, leaving behind a cold and stiff body that looked like a corpse. His unfocused eyes stared straight at the passage leading to this floor of the prison. Because of the different angles of the cells, Rodolphus and Bellatrix could not see where he was looking at. Labastan's lips had turned white, and his eyes were blue and black. As he breathed, frost gradually covered his upper lip, mouth, and nose. Thick, white mist spurted out of his mouth and condensed into ice on the iron bars. He was twitching and trembling. Rodolphus stared at him nervously, for fear that his soul would leave this body in the next second. At this time, Bellatrix could already see Morgatha's shadow from the corner of her eyes. She noticed that a kind of darkness that devoured the surrounding light gradually appeared around them. Even the brightness in the prison had decreased a lot. A shadow that was far taller than ordinary people slowly appeared in her field of vision. The shadow slowly turned around. Then she saw a pair of eyes that shone like flames in the inexplicable darkness. Ah! Bellatrix felt a powerful spirit rushing into her mind. She felt as if a cold tentacle had reached into her head. It could even be said that it was cold, chaotic, dark, and extremely evil. They whispered in her mind like some fragmented whispers. The violent mental impact caused her mouth and nose to bleed, but she did not care about it anymore. What really scared her and made her want to dig her brain out were the indescribable things that entered her mind. The sound of Mirko in the grand symphony of creation, the source of evil from another universe, the flower of evil that bloomed again after usurping the chaotic consciousness and dark and evil force of the will of the abyss in the world of Pharaon. It was called the Abyss Whispers by the believers and priests of the gods. As a powerful evil god of the multiverse who carried an evil aura, an aura of fear and dark spiritual energy, the abyssal whispers that Morgoth carried was enough to brainwash the Empyrean gods and the benevolent races of the upper planes. Black blood oozed out from Bellatrix's facial orifices. Her body trembled violently. The after-effects of being tortured by the Dementors had made her a little insane. Rodolphius ran over in horror. He lifted her head with his trembling hands. But it was already too late. Bellatrix's fragile spirit had been tortured day and night in Azkaban. After the first wave of impact from the dark force and the evil aura, she had already suffered irreversible damage. It seems like the weak humans still find it difficult to look at my true face. Morgoth and Chin sighed. He retracted the undulations that he had unconsciously released. He walked out from the mass of darkness that looked like a human, but was actually just a mass of thick, impenetrable darkness. In order to prevent the prisoners of Azkaban from being driven mad by Morgoth's true face, he came in front of them in his human form. His face was exactly the same as Chenang's, but they would not be mistaken as the same person. Morgoth's dark force, the aura of fear, was too strong for humans. It was like a piece of information that was difficult for the human consciousness to understand, but it was forced into their brains to understand. Compared to this pain, the information of appearance was too insignificant, so much so that it was often ignored. It was like an actor with superb acting skills. When playing different roles, people would often be confused by their temperament and forget that it was the same face. At this time, the prisoners of Azkaban broke free from the suffocating darkness that surrounded Morgoth. Bellatrix's constantly struggling and trembling body slowly calmed down, and Labasta no longer twitched. At this time, the organized criminals imprisoned in Azkaban finally had the energy to look at this uninvited guest. Morgoth's gaze slid across their faces one by one. He whispered their names: Antonin Dolohov, Bellatrix Lestrange, Labasta Lestrange, Rodolphius Lestrange, Augustus Rookwood, Amicus Caro, Electo Caro. There are a total of 28 pure-blood families in the British magic world. I see many people here. Some even have an entire family here. 28 pure bloods. The reason why pure bloods are called pure bloods isn't because they have excellent bloodlines or are born with powerful magical powers. It's because they believe that they're more pure bloods than others. I'm glad that none of you are indecisive. Pure blood families that sometimes agree and sometimes disagree. I've gathered 28 and a half summoned. Rodolphius Lestrange struggled to stand up. He looked at Chinong and asked in a low voice, "May I ask who you are, Your Excellency?" "You don't deserve to know my name." Morgoth glanced at Bellatrix, who was paralyzed on the ground, and nodded with a smile. "Unless you want to be like her. With your shallow power, the moment you look at me and hear my name, you will inevitably go crazy. So you can follow the tradition here and call me Mystery Man. No, you don't deserve that title." Bellatrix, who was on the ground, seemed to have heard something. Her body instinctively struggled violently. She looked at Morgoth's face, even though her spirit had suffered irrecoverable damage. Half of it was madness, and the other half was due to some kind of obsession. She roared, "That title belongs to a great king, and his power is beyond your imagination. He is Mystery Man, and you are just a clown, a clumsy imitator." As soon as Bellatrix said this, the air in the cell became quiet. The Death Eaters were so silent that they almost suffocated. Among them, there were many reasons for becoming followers of Voldemort. There were the weak who sought protection from being bullied. There were those who worshipped power and only wanted to touch the prestige of the dark Devil King. There were also those who were cruel and violent who were attracted by a leader who could teach them a higher form of cruelty. They were all people who felt that they were getting weaker and weaker in the changing times of the magic world. They had one thing in common, which was that they felt mentally uncomfortable and lost their interests now that the mixed blood sorcerers were gradually dominating the development of the magic world. These people who lost their interests hoped to return to the past, to the time when they could do whatever they wanted with just a surname. They wanted to return to the time when pure-blooded magic world made them feel safe, powerful, and superior. At this time, Voldemort became the leader they elected, and they believed that Voldemort could give them the results they wanted. But now that Voldemort had failed once, many people had woken up from their momentary fanaticism and realized that Voldemort might not be able to give them what they wanted. The reason why the Death Eaters still maintained a complete organization was because they had nowhere else to go. Unless Voldemort returned, they would all be locked up in Azkaban until they died. At this time, Voldemort became a symbol of hope. And this leader was really cold-blooded and cruel. So cruel that even some Death Eaters found it cruel. They were afraid of his punishment and did not dare to disobey him. Old Malfoy's betrayal did not only represent him, but a large number of Death Eaters had the same thoughts. So, other than a lunatic like Bellatrix, they would rather not speak. Him. Morgoth laughed softly. "You mean Tom Riddle?" Chapter 7, 73. Hearing that name, all the Death Eaters at the scene subconsciously stood up straight, while Bellatrix, who was already delirious and crazy, screamed, "How dare you? How dare you call out that name?" "Why wouldn't I dare?" Morgoth's voice was calm. "Is it because Tom Riddle cast a spell on the name so that he could sense the person who said the name and appear in front of them with a phantom shift to bring them death? But he's already a dead dog now." Morgoth sighed and said, "The wizards are afraid of this name. Even after he died, they couldn't sense the location of the person who spoke the name through the magic spell. They agreed to call him the Mysterious Man, and the person whose name cannot be spoken. In this regard, he did a good job. Voldemort is a person who knows how to use cruelty and fear to enslave people, just like how he enslaved you all. But fear can always be overshadowed by greater fear, just like power can always be subdued by greater power. Some people with true beliefs, I respect them, and I don't think I can control them, even if these beliefs are paranoid or distorted. For example, Dumbledore. But for those who submit to their own fear and the cruelty of others, I have confidence in controlling them, because if they can submit to one dark devil, they can certainly submit to another. If they can kneel to a dark devil because of their strength and cruelty, then they can kneel at my feet, because I can always be stronger and crueler than others. Didn't you ask me who I am?" Morgoth smiled. Morgoth. Divided into 3 steps, the tip of the tongue curls back, falls on the teeth, presses against the roof of the mouth, reverberates in the nasal cavity. Morgoth. His whisper rang in the ears of Bellatrix, who had already gone mad. Morgoth used Quenya to say the word that meant horror and darkness, then repeated it in the language of blasphemy, the language of the abyss and the common tongue, and finally in English. The true name was like a hyperlink. When it fell into Bellatrix's ears, it was like a key that opened the door to the bottomless abyss. She could not help but peep into the deep darkness and evil behind the name. A large amount of evil knowledge and dark power that she could not understand poured into her brain. The darkness from the owner of the name radiated like the abyss, polluting her soul. Bellatrix lost her voice completely. She looked at Morgoth's shadow standing in front of them, but through this shadow she saw the bottomless, dark abyss behind it. A large amount of dark, red, extravasated blood seeped out of her facial features. Her eyes became completely black, and her pupils and the whites of her eyes could not be seen. Her lips and nails turned black. Her mouth and nose were covered in blood, and the weak spots of her skin where the bloody light could be seen were all dark and purple. It was like the livor mortis under the skin after death. Bellatrix had begun to transform like an undead creature. The parts of her that were human were becoming less and less, and the parts that represented death and darkness had gradually begun to corrode her soul. Her husband, Rodolphus Lestrange, looked at all this in fear, but did not dare to approach her. He was afraid of the Dark Lord, so he turned a blind eye to the absurd behavior of his wife, who had been obsessed with Voldemort and even wanted to marry Voldemort. Deep in his heart, he was also afraid of Voldemort and even his wife, Bellatrix. He was very sure that if he betrayed Voldemort one day, Bellatrix would definitely skin him alive for Voldemort. In this fear, he called Voldemort our common leader, and tried to convince himself that it was not fear, but that they all worshipped Voldemort fervently. But when facing Morgoth, he could no longer convince himself like this. Death Eaters had no loyalty. If there was anything, it could only be loyalty to benefits and power, because all of Voldemort's authority was built on his cruelty, madness, and strength. Once there was an existence that was more powerful and ruthless than Voldemort, their loyalty would be thinner than paper, weaker than even their chastity, and their knees would turn to jelly like noodles. So these loyal followers of Voldemort and cruel and ruthless Death Eaters, who were locked up in Azkaban, just quietly watched Morgoth torture Bellatrix. This most loyal follower of Voldemort acted as if they were a group of harmless Hogwarts first-year students. What have you been waiting for? You seem to be waiting for his return loyally. But I know that you are not waiting for him, but a hope that will allow you to turn over a new leaf. Because if there is no hope, you will be here, under the watch of the Soul Catcher, tortured to death. Morgoth sneered. You are like drowning people, tightly holding on to the last straw, and the name of this straw is Voldemort. You boast of your loyalty? No, I only see a group of red-eyed gamblers, fighting with everything they have. Morgoth raised his right hand, in which he held a small black leather book. As the person closest to Voldemort, you should know his soul vessel, the golden goblet for Hufflepuff, given to you by Voldemort, his most trusted Death Eater. Morgoth lowered his head and said to Bellatrix, Ravenclaw's crown, in the room of Hogwarts' absolute response. Slytherin's locket, Voldemort kept it in a cave by the sea he discovered when he was young, but it has been stolen and is now hidden in the Black family's old house. Marvolo Gaunt's ring, embedded with a resurrection stone, hidden in the Gaunt family's old house. Nagini the Great Snake, still by Voldemort's side. Of course, and Harry Potter, the Savior's classmate, now studying at Hogwarts. Every time Morgoth mentioned the whereabouts of a soul vessel, the surrounding Death Eaters grew more fearful, and Bellatrix struggled even more violently, especially when Morgoth mentioned the Hufflepuff golden goblet that she had hidden. In the end, when Morgoth said the name of Harry Potter, most of the Death Eaters were at a loss, but a small portion of the truly intelligent ones were aghast. They didn't think that even Voldemort himself didn't know about this soul armament. Instead, they took it for granted that this was something Voldemort had set up before his death. It was to hide the last soul armament in the most unlikely place, and he didn't tell anyone about it. Morgoth held the black leather book in his hand and continued, There's also Tom Riddle's diary when he was young. He gave it to one of his most important subordinates, Malfoy, as a reward. Now it's here. Morgoth raised the black leather book in his hand. On the cover, Voldemort's name was particularly glaring in the eyes of the Death Eaters. Morgoth came in front of Bellatrix and asked her in a low voice, You think of yourself as Voldemort's most loyal follower and subordinate. Then, are you willing to pay a price so that Voldemort's soul fragment in this diary can be replenished with life force and be resurrected? Bellatrix grabbed the diary in Morgatha's hand in a frenzy and laughed maniacally. "He will make you regret coming to these worlds." With that, she bit open the artery on her wrist with her teeth and sprayed fresh blood on the diary. She raised her head and laughed maniacally. "Come back. My master, come back. Let those who betrayed you pay the price. Let those who offend you never be reincarnated. Let those muggles and mudbloods die without a burial ground." The black leather notebook was soaked in blood, and the blood on its leather cover was rapidly disappearing as if it was devouring thirstily. The originally dry leather seemed to be full of blood and began to become moist and fresh. The black leather seemed to be alive, its texture becoming warm and full of moisture, like the skin of some creature. It began to open automatically, and the blank pages greedily sucked Bellatrix's blood. A line of words written in blood began to appear on it. Gradually, the words written in blood became impatient when no one responded for a long time. A wave of black magic that everyone present was very familiar with came from it, and it seemed to be invading Bellatrix's brain. Bellatrix did not resist at all, and just like that, she exposed the life force and soul of the words to Voldemort's soul fragment. However, the surrounding Death Eaters were already showing expressions of sympathy, as if there was some resonance between them. There was no doubt that Voldemort's soul fragment knew who was providing it with life force. Even if it did not know at the beginning, it should have been clear when it had begun to use black magic to recover its strength. But Voldemort was just so cold-blooded, greedily sucking the life force of his most loyal subordinate without the slightest hesitation. Even though Bellatrix was on the verge of death and could die at any time, Voldemort, who seemed to know something from Bellatrix's memory, showed an imposing manner that would not stop until he squeezed Bellatrix dry. He also wanted to squeeze out Bellatrix's soul and memory, but Bellatrix, who had seen Morgatha's true face and knew his real name, had a large part of her soul contaminated. Voldemort was afraid of this power that would contaminate her soul, so he preserved a part of her soul and memory. Thick black mist rose from the cover of the notebook, and the black magic on it provided Voldemort's soul with considerable power. A very young, or even handsome, young man appeared in front of everyone. He looked at Morgoth as if he wanted to show off his glib tongue. This was a soul fragment of Voldemort when he was young. Unlike Voldemort, who later became cruel, violent, and crazy because he split his soul to create a soul fragment, this soul fragment was more intelligent and rational. It inherited Voldemort's forbearance and cleverness during his time at Hogwarts, and was even somewhat calm when facing Morgoth. Chapter 774. Morgoth looked at the young Tom Riddle and said calmly, "Very good. Compared to people like Dumbledore, it should be easier for the two of us to communicate with each other. Because compared to those who believe in love and those who are obsessed with their own ideals, people who believe in power are easier to convince. Just like when Dumbledore first saw you. He used his power to make you admit your mistakes, right?" Morgoth laughed. What a hypocritical person. To a child full of suspicion and born cruel, Dumbledore chose to threaten and use violence to warn you and make you admit your mistakes. From this, Dumbledore is a hypocritical and smart person. Morgoth smiled. He saw through your nature at a glance and chose to use your own method to warn you. This proves 2 points. Dumbledore believes that you are a born cruel person, or rather, he believes that some people are born kind saviors, and some people are born to be the dark devil. This is different from what he claims. Many of the professors at Hogwarts believe that you have become like this because they have not given you enough love. But Dumbledore claims that you are just born evil and cruel. So when he first saw you in the orphanage, he burned a wardrobe in front of you, using the fierceness and violence of the fire to make you admit your mistakes. As for the savior who is prophesied to end you, he placed him in an environment even colder and crueler than the one you were in the orphanage, letting him grow up in cold violence and contempt. Just because you are the dark devil and he is the savior. Although wizards do not believe in religion, Dumbledore's views are the same as those Western muggles who believe in Christianity. They all advocate something above man. For Muggles, that is God, but for Dumbledore, I do not know what it is. It may be fate, or it may be some kind of philosophy. They believe that everything operates under a certain philosophy that God, or Dumbledore, believes in. Good and evil are inborn. Prophecies are predetermined, and human nature has been determined before he was born. For example, you are Voldemort, and Harry Potter is the savior. In a sense, what Dumbledore believes in is even more rotten than your bloodline theory. Tom Riddle laughed. His temperament was elegant and calm, and his every move was more noble than those pure bloods who claimed to be born nobles. It was no wonder that those pure bloods would worship such a mudborn as their leader. Of course, the real reason was Voldemort's power, but it was also related to his bewitching temperament. Tom Riddle was easy to like when he was patient and in disguise. This was completely different from the madness and irritation, as well as the ferociousness and cruelty that he revealed after he split his 7 soul fragments. Both Chinong and Morgoth believed that no one was born evil, but it was difficult for them to not be evil when they placed their soul fragments on items that had been enchanted with the Black Devil King and exposed their souls to the darkness, agitation, and distortion of black magic for a long time. Furthermore, what was the difference between letting the soul leave the protection of the body and coming into contact with chaotic and distorted magic power and the candy that eaters always gave out? Voldemort had endured until now to show signs of madness, which was a testament to the strength of his will and the determination of his heart. Morgoth admired this kind of madman who pursued eternal life. In the words of a martial cultivator, this was also a certain degree of firmness in the heart of the Tao. Tom Riddle said in a low voice, "I'm glad that someone saw through Dumbledore's hypocritical face like me. Dumbledore believes that there is absolute good and evil in this world, but I don't think there is absolute good and evil in this world. The difference is only between the strong and the weak who can't tell the truth. In this sense, Dumbledore is a strong person, but he always indulges in the will of the weak." "So you're very regretful?" Morgoth asked in return. He shook his head and said, "No, Dumbledore is just insisting on his own will. Many people think that he stands on the side of the weak, but in fact he is like us, standing on his own side. Carrying out his own will not be moved by others. Do you think that Dumbledore is succumbing to the will of those people? In fact, he is driving them to carry out his will. Dumbledore and you are both very good at grasping the weakness of the weak. You grasp their fear, and Dumbledore grasps their love. So, Snape once succumbed to you." Tom Riddle, "No, it should be Voldemort," laughed heartily. He nodded and said, "Yes, we are all experts. It's just that our goals are different. What I pursue, as my name says, is Voldemort, surpassing death, achieving eternity, and ruling over everything. And Dumbledore, he is too weak. What he pursues is actually a pair of woolen socks. In English, woolen socks refer to kinship or love. But in the process of carrying out our will, we are equally ruthless. This should be the reason why we are strong." But at this moment, Morgoth laughed coldly. "Strong?" he asked in return, then laughed. No, to these people." He drew a circle on the heads of the Death Eaters with his wand and said, "You may be called strong, but now I am here. And you, or Dumbledore, are actually no different from them. Both are weak. Mental retardation." Morgoth did not even wave his wand. Instead, he calmly uttered these 2 words and cast a classic arcane spell on Voldemort. The arcane energy absorbed from the Well of Eternity turned into a circle of green light that appeared out of thin air and wrapped around Voldemort. His exquisite arcane control suppressed part of the effect of mental retardation, so that Voldemort would not really become mentally retarded. He only extracted all of Voldemort's wisdom and memories. Among all the living beings in the world of magic, only your ideals count. Morgoth nodded and smiled as he pointed at Tom Riddle. "A wizard who can't even defeat a monster without his wand can only be called strong in front of you. Morgoth said as he glanced at the trembling Death Eaters. I didn't ask you to come out to discuss your weak and laughable beliefs with you, but to make my authority deeper and more firmly rooted in their hearts. I want these ants to experience deep fear whenever they think of me in their insignificant and short lives. Morgoth's whispers echoed in everyone's ears. Now, you still don't know who you're facing, but you'll know soon enough. Morgoth raised his wand and whispered to Voldemort, who had a look of disbelief and hatred. Malicious transformation! In the invisible force field of arcane control, Tom Riddle's body suddenly twisted. His face contorted in fear, but he could not struggle at all as he turned into a big black dog. I hope Sirius will like you now, Morgoth said coldly to the black dog that Voldemort had turned into. He glanced at Gru behind him. Gru, who had turned into Boijin, trembled and took out a bottle of powerful aphrodisiac in fear. Voldemort, who had turned into a big black dog, struggled violently, but Gru, who was afraid of Morgoth, pressed him down ferociously and poured the aphrodisiac into Voldemort's mouth. Send it to Sirius, Morgoth said indifferently. I'm giving Sirius a chance to take revenge with his own hands. I hope he doesn't hate me. Not everyone has the chance to be the Dark Devil's man. The last person who did this was Albus Dumbledore. Voldemort, who had turned into a big black dog, widened his eyes. His eyes were bloodshot as he stared at Morgoth with extreme hatred. Morgoth lowered his head and said to him, Hate me. Your hatred will give you strength. As long as a part of your soul remains in the soul vessel, you will not be able to resist me. Pain and hatred will make you realize that you're still a weakling. Work hard to become stronger. At least get the Black Scripture of the Dead and retrieve your lost soul fragments. Otherwise, you'll have to taste the humiliation of being manipulated by others again. You should be thankful that Sirius is imprisoned here. Otherwise, a real dog would make you the laughingstock of the entire world of magic. Look, Chen-Ong pointed at the Death Eaters. They looked at Chen-Ong with incomparable fear in their eyes. To the sensitive Voldemort, there was no longer the respect and fear in their eyes. Instead, there was a hint of strangeness. Morgoth laughed softly. Look at them. Who would still fear you? Who would still be willing to be loyal to you from the bottom of their hearts? This is what I want. They will submit to power. Submit to me. Morgoth turned his head and berated, Kneel. A Death Eater with disheveled hair and a dirty face was the first to kneel hesitantly, followed by the second. Gradually, the speed at which they knelt became faster and faster. There were fewer and fewer people standing. After a while, there was not a single Death Eater left standing in front of Voldemort. They knelt in the cell. Morgoth waved his wand in his hand, and the dark devil mark on the Death Eater's left wrist suddenly appeared. The Death Eaters felt a sharp pain as if their flesh was being gouged out. All of their dark devil marks disappeared, and in exchange, their right hands felt as if they were being scorched by hot iron. An active fire dragon mark slowly entrenched itself on their right arms, swimming towards their hearts. Hate me, Morgoth smiled. Your eyes are very powerful now. This is what I want. Morgoth turned to the former Death Eaters and said, You're loyal to the Dark Devil King, not Voldemort. That's good. I don't have to go on a killing spree. Although you can work for me, whether you're alive or dead, I still hope that I can have some living people under me. Wizards, not house pets or undead creatures. He turned around and returned Gru to its original form. If anyone disobeys my order, I won't give him a second chance. I'll turn him or her into a house elf, just like Boijin Bok. Hearing him say Gru's name, a low gasp came from the former Death Eaters. Morgoth coldly extended his wand and turned the former Death Eater, who made the sound, into an equally ugly house pet. The powerful power of baleful polymorph immediately took root in all the former Death Eaters. Master! The house pet screamed frantically. Master, no, please, Master. But Gru quickly phased back and took him away. You see, loyalty is cheap." Morgoth laughed softly. The Death Eaters below were even more frightened and frightened. All of them knelt on the ground, not daring to make a sound. "Now, the dark devil you are loyal to is me, Morgoth. As the new Dark Devil King, I order you to contact your companions who are not in Azkaban, inform them of this change, and bring them here. If they do not obey, then use the power of the mark I gave you to bring them here by force. This mark is called the Star of Mirko. Through this mark, you can sense the power of the Star of Mirko in the sky. This power allows you to contact me and borrow my power." Chapter 775. School had already started at Hogwarts, and Harry Potter had been annoyed to death by Lockhart for the past few days. He did not even have time to flip through the Golden Book. Furthermore, he had too many roommates: Ron, Neville Longbottom, Seamus Finnegan, and Dean Thomas. He did not have the slightest bit of freedom. For some reason, he did not even want to share the book with Ron. Perhaps it was because he had used dishonorable means to obtain this book. Furthermore, based on Harry's understanding of Ron, if he saw a magic book made of gold, he would shout that the whole of Gryffindor would know. Harry was deeply disturbed by his previous behavior, as if he had been possessed. In terms of material, the Book of the Golden Sun was worth a lot of money. Just the gold alone was worth a lot of gold coins. He hesitated to return the book or give it to Dumbledore, but every time he took a short moment to sneak a peek at the Book of the Golden Sun he had hidden under his pillow. The light refracted from the golden pages reflected off his glasses, and there was a voice in his heart telling him to give it a try. At this time, it would always remind him of the illusions he had seen in the magic mirror of Eris. That day, Lockhart once again made a mess of the class. Harry was tired of dealing with both Colin and Lockhart during the day, and he had already made a detour to avoid Lockhart in the corridor whenever he saw him. But Colin Creevey was hard to avoid. He seemed to have memorized Harry's class schedule. Every time they met, Colin would respectfully and adore him, saying, "Hello, Harry." He had to reply, "Hello, Colin," 6 or 7 times a day, and Harry was bored to death. That night, after his roommates had gone to bed, Harry could no longer suppress his pounding heart. He put down the curtains and took out the Book of the Golden Sun from under his pillow. He pulled out his wand and whispered to the book, "Fluorescent twinkle." The white light at the tip of the wand shone on the Book of the Golden Sun, and the magic book reflected a brilliant light. This light flowed along the pages, and although it was not dazzling, it had a kind of splendor. The golden light revealed a kind of sacred, eternal charm. Between the floating golden Egyptian hieroglyphs, a poem of the gods was narrated. The page of the golden book that Harry flipped through was engraved with a hymn to the sun god. "Praise thee, Allah, thy amazing ascent. You rise, shine, and cause the heavens to roll to one side. You are the king of the gods, the master of all things. We come from you, we are made holy by you. Thy priests go forth at dawn, and wash their hearts with mirth. The sacred wind blows upon your golden strings with music. At sunset, they embrace you like every cloud. From thy wings shines the color of the horizon." There is no doubt that this was a poem praising Ra, the sun god, but Harry could not figure out what it had to do with magic, let alone the secret of resurrection magic. Unwilling to give up, he turned 2 more pages. This Rise of the Dead, Praise the Sun actually had 3 pages in the book. He racked his brains, but could not find any clue from it. Harry was extremely disappointed. He closed the book in frustration and muttered, "This could be a hoax, just as Malfoy's father said. Could it be a tool that Boggin, the owner of the black magic shop, uses to trick the muggles? Or maybe I don't understand ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs at all. Maybe Hermione can. She's Miss Know-it-all." He was about to put the golden book under his pillow, but as soon as he touched the pillow, he bounced off the bed like a spring. He was so excited that he could not speak coherently. "But I can't understand those weird hieroglyphs at all," he muttered to himself. "Then how do I know the meaning of the poem engraved on it?" Harry took out the golden book again. He was sure that he was unfamiliar with the words written on it. But when the words flowed in the golden light, he inexplicably understood its meaning. It all happened so naturally that he could not react for a moment. He prepared to recite the hymn-like incantation, but just as he was about to recite it, he heard the sound of Ron grinding his teeth. Harry picked up the Golden Book of the Sun and found the invisibility cloak nearby. He decided to go to the abandoned classroom where he had found the Mirror of Eris. He sneaked out of the dormitory, down the stairs through the common room, and climbed over the portly lady's portrait hole. When he returned to the abandoned classroom, the Mirror of Eris had disappeared. But the desks and chairs in the corner and the overturned wastepaper basket were still there. The moonlight shone into the abandoned classroom, allowing Harry to see everything clearly even without the light. Harry was lost in thought as he looked at the place where the Mirror of Eris had visited. It was one of the places he was most familiar with. During those few nights, he came here every night and stared at the mirror for a long time. He opened the Golden Book of the Sun in the moonlight and turned to the page where the poem, Rise of the Dead, Praise the Sun, was recorded. In the moonlight, the light flowing on the Golden Book was a little cold. It was different from the golden color that Harry had seen during the day, and also different from the dark gold that had just been cast by the fluorescent spell. Now the book was flowing with a platinum brilliance. Harry cleared his throat, lowered his voice, and chanted instinctively, Praise thee, Allah, to thy amazing rise. Thou art rising, shining, and making the heavens roll aside. Thou art the King of the gods, the Lord of all. We come from thee, and because of thee we are holy. Thou didst pass the zenith, and thy heart rejoiceth. Thy boat of dawn and of dusk have fair winds. Before thee Met lifteth up her fateful plume, and the halls of Anu are tumultuous with thy name. O thou perfect God, eternal God, and only God, the great eagle that soars with the rising sun. On the green fig tree, thy ever-young image shines across the heart of the heavenly river. Thy light shines on every face, and no one knows it. For thousands of years, thou art the source of new life. Harry had learned ancient Egyptian without a teacher, and he sang in a long priestly tone with a hint of holiness. It was very strange in the abandoned classroom at night. Gradually, Harry's body became transparent, and he entered a dark, cold world. Everything around him began to become colder. Except for the moonlight, everything lost some of its luster. If Harry looked straight, he could even see that the scenery around him was a bit distorted, as if it was in a mirror. But he did not notice it now. He was completely immersed in the Golden Book of the Sun. His voice unconsciously became high-pitched, like the grand chant of the priests in ancient Egypt. It echoed in the empty corridors of Hogwarts. In the distance, Mischievous screamed excitedly, Little Devil! There's a little devil who's not sleeping, but wandering the corridors at night. Mischievous took the lead and flew towards the source of the sound. Filch and his cat followed at a distance. Mischievous broke into the abandoned classroom and did not know what he had interrupted. Chapter 776. The interrupted Harry woke up with a start. He had only glanced back unconsciously, but the light from his eyes had severely injured Naughty. This made Harry very afraid. He tucked the book under his armpit, ready to put on the invisibility cloak and run back, but Filch had already rushed in. Harry's heart seemed to stop beating. He thought in despair, It's over. I'm going to be fired. The thought of leaving Hogwarts and going back to his uncle made Harry feel an indescribable pain in his heart. But what happened next surprised him. Filch acted as if he didn't see him, staring blankly at the empty space around him. Suddenly, Filch smiled and whispered, Harry Potter, and your invisibility cloak? You can't escape from me, Filch said. He opened his hands and reached forward. He also blocked the door tightly. It looked like he was going to fish in the river. Harry tensed up again. Filch was like a skinny monkey, waving his hands towards him. Harry had nowhere to hide. He was forced into a corner. Filch seemed to have confirmed his prey's location and pounced on him. Harry closed his eyes nervously, but all he heard was a cry of pain. Filch crashed into the wall. His nose seemed to be crooked from the impact. Harry opened his eyes and was shocked to see that half of Filch's hand was still waving at his chest, but it had passed through like a phantom. The old squib yelled angrily, "Who is it? Who is it?" Harry didn't dare to delay. He rushed to the door. The walls and doors seemed to be no obstacle in front of him. He easily passed through them. At this time, Harry realized that there was something wrong with the world he was in. It was as if there was a layer of glass between them. The world in his eyes was dark, distorted, and even lost some of its warmth and color. He easily passed through the material and even walked toward Snape's chest. He made a face at Snape. Snape looked up, as if he had noticed something. Filch walked out with his cat and said to Snape in a low voice, "Professor, someone was just wandering around here at night. He also attacked Naughty. I don't know where Naughty is now." Filch's pale and thin face was full of fear. His nose was a little crooked, but his cat, Madame Dolores, was furious. Meow. Madame Dolores screamed mournfully. This small, scrawny animal with dark gray fur stared nervously in the direction where Harry Potter was hiding. "It seems to be frightened," Filch nervously explained to Snape, because half of Harry Potter and Snape's bodies overlapped. It looked as though Lady Dolores was shouting at Snape. Snape glanced at Madame Lollis thoughtfully. He raised his head and observed his surroundings keenly. His brows furrowed deeply, and his greasy hair almost fell on Harry Potter's face. Filch was horrified as he prepared to carry the mournful, wailing little animal. It was so nervous that it was trembling. Harry saw that Madame Dolores was staring into his eyes, and realized that Madame Dolores could see him. Previously, he thought that Madame Dolores was also afraid of that old bat. "Professor," Filch seemed to want to explain. Snape raised his hand to stop him from continuing. He said in a low voice, "Maybe it's not the bat's problem. Legend has it that cats are wizards' best friends, because they can always discover things that wizards can't see. These black magic creations are very dangerous to wizards, so many wizards like to keep cats as a precaution." "Then what could these black magic creations be?" Filch asked fawningly. "Does it have anything to do with what just happened?" "It's usually spirits and magical creatures that are harmful to muggles and sorcerers. Although we can see some of the spirits, there are some dangerous evil spirits created by black magic that even sorcerers can't see. They are evil, bloodthirsty, and very dangerous. They walk in a world called the spirit realm. Legend has it that this is the place that souls must pass to return to their home. In order to create these undetectable evil killers, some dark wizards torture muggles and even wizards, using black magic to curse their souls, so that these souls can't go deeper into the spirit realm. They can only wander between the spirit realm and the human world, becoming their weapons. In order to prevent the evil spirits from attacking them, the dark wizards would keep a cat. Because cats also walk between life and death, they can see the evil spirits hidden in the spirit realm, so that they can be wary of these monsters." Spirit realm? Harry seemed to understand something. He quietly retreated, and Madame Dolores couldn't see him. He also gradually calmed down. Snape looked behind him suspiciously, but Harry had already walked far away. His mind was filled with confusion. Am I in the spirit realm now? The power of the sun golden scripture brought me here? How do I get out? Is what Snape said true? The spirit realm is a journey back to the home of reincarnation, so that book can bring people back to the home of their souls, then bring them back to our world and resurrect them? Thinking of this, Harry tightened his grip on the sun golden scripture in his arms. When he passed by the headmaster's office, he thought for a moment, then quietly walked in. He didn't know what he wanted to do, to chat with Dumbledore, or to tell him about the sun golden scripture. He quietly crawled into the headmaster's office through the wall, and to his surprise, Dumbledore was still inside. Under the illumination of the fireplace, The lighting in the room fluctuated. It was already the wee hours of the morning, and the portraits of the previous headmasters were dozing off in their respective frames. Professor Dumbledore was sitting in front of his desk with his fingers crossed, looking at a visitor from the Ministry of Magic in front of him. He said in a low voice, "We've lost contact with Azkaban." The gentleman in front of him said, "Yes, if what Sirius said is true, a group of dark wizards attacked Azkaban the day before yesterday. We have no way of contacting Azkaban now. That area of the sea has been cast with powerful dark magic. Sirens sing amidst the strong winds and waves. Dementas dance in the wind and rain, and a large number of ghost ships appear in the fog, filled with evil spirits and water demons. Azkaban has been hidden by someone, and the auras can't fight against the Dementors, water demons, and sirens in such harsh sea conditions. And we have to guard against the Death Eaters who escaped. Someone has already seen them in Knockout Alley. The one who attacked Azkaban wasn't Voldemort?" Dumbledore lit his pipe. "Yes. Sirius said it was someone else who couldn't be named. Voldemort's soul vessel suffered a crushing defeat in his hands. But, strangely, he didn't seem to want to talk about it. But we can't ask him. Some people in the Ministry think that we can't trust the words of a Death Eater, the Black Devil's loyal lackey. This must be another conspiracy by the Death Eaters, so that everyone won't forget the mysterious person who has already died. Although people say that Sirius betrayed his best friend, I believe that there must be a hidden story behind it. I've always advocated for this case to be handled with caution, but no one in the Ministry of Magic listened to me. The person in front of him said awkwardly, 'This!' After all, Sirius has admitted it himself. I want to see his letter." Dumbledore said, "Please wait a moment. Mr. Fudge will send it to you in a moment." Sirius' letter described the dark wizard as incomparably terrifying. He said that he had cruelly killed the Black Devil's most loyal follower, Bellatrix Lestrange, and enslaved her soul, transforming her into a banshee. It's a newly created magical creature of black magic. The souls of witches are imprisoned in their corpses and transformed under the magic power of the full moon. And the Death Eaters who surrendered to him were bestowed with powerful black magic power. This is indirectly proven. We accidentally caught traces of Rabaston Lestrange in that area of the sea. His black magic power was stronger than we expected. Under the siege of 7 auras, he heavily injured 3 of them, killed 1 aura, and left unharmed. Chapter 777. At this moment, a person that Harry Potter did not expect barged in. He glanced at the gentleman from the Ministry of Magic. His eyes were narrow and cold under his greasy black hair. The Ministry of Magic's envoy wisely kept his mouth shut. He did not want to say anything in front of Snape. If not for Dumbledore testifying for him, Snape would have long been locked up in Azkaban. At that time, the Death Eater that Voldemort trusted the most was not Bellatrix, but Snape. Snape swept his gaze across the headmaster's office. Harry hurriedly hid himself well. Even though Snape could not see him, he still hid under the rows of bookshelves in the headmaster's office. He quickly realized that this was a wise move because Snape was following behind Filch, and he was still carrying the cat. "Headmaster." Snape saw that Madame Dolores did not have any unusual behavior, so he said to Dumbledore, "I would like to invite you over. The school might have been invaded." The Ministry of Magic's envoy almost jumped up. He said nervously, "It must be them. Headmaster Dumbledore. It must be those Death Eaters." Snape stared at him. His gloomy eyes made the Ministry of Magic's envoy's hair stand on end. He used his usual deep voice to ask, "What happened that I don't know about?" He looked at Dumbledore and said in a low voice, "You promised to tell me about him." Dumbledore stood up and said to the Ministry of Magic's envoy, "Mr. Weitzman, I will definitely carefully consider the matter you tell me. Now there is a problem in the school that requires me to solve it, so I will not be sending you out." The Ministry of Magic's envoy hurriedly stood up, and after bidding farewell to Dumbledore, he glanced at Snape and walked out of the headmaster's office with a face full of suspicion. Filch also followed him out after Dumbledore signaled him to. Only Dumbledore and Snape were left in the headmaster's office, while Harry hid in a corner and listened to their conversation quietly. Dumbledore's beard reached his chest. He stood up, and because he was too tall, he had to lower his head slightly to look at Snape at the same level. His eyes peeked out from the gap above the lenses, staring at Snape. "Severus, I don't remember you being such an impetuous person." Snape laughed coldly. "I've always been like this." Although he said that, he still calmed down and said in a low voice, "Malfoy. Malfoy has some problems. Recently, he has been asking me questions about black magic. It's very advanced black magic, including how to enslave a soul, how to resurrect a dead person." Harry's heart almost stopped when he heard this. His mind was in a whirl. He felt that he had learned a very important secret of Malfoy's. Snape could not know, because he had not heard what Malfoy had said at Borgins. Harry was sure that Malfoy had gone back to the dark magic shop. He could not buy the Golden Book of the Sun, because he had taken it with him, but he must have gotten his hands on some dark magic gadget. For the first time, Harry was glad that he had chosen to steal the book, or it would have fallen into Malfoy's hands. His youthful sense of justice diluted the uneasiness in his heart. "So, you suspect that Malfoy got his hands on the Horcrux hidden in Malfoy's house, and he is under Voldemort's control?" Dumbledore asked. There was the sound of a spell being chanted in an abandoned classroom in the east, and Mischievous was injured because of it. You should know that not all magic can harm a spirit. Filch must have barged in immediately after Mischievous was injured, but there was no one inside. He also did not manage to touch someone who might have used the disillusionment curse or the invisibility cloak. "I suspect it's a demon, an evil spirit." Dumbledore shook his head. "You should know how much old Malfoy loves his child. He would never let Dracula get hurt, even if it was his life. That's why I did not send him to Azkaban. He is different from most Death Eaters. His love for his family is more than anything else." "So you're hoping that this will make him betray Voldemort one day and join your side?" Snape mocked sharply. "Just like me." Dumbledore looked at him in silence and said sincerely, "People make choices for love. They do not join me, but choose love. I believe that anyone who truly loves someone will eventually part ways with Voldemort, because Death Eaters only have hatred in their hearts, while Voldemort only wants to surpass death. I did not choose you, but you chose me. You will drag him into that vortex." Snape said angrily, "I am his godfather after all. Old Malfoy's stupidity should not be borne by him. So please help him." Snape looked at Dumbledore pleadingly. "Save him." Dumbledore said solemnly, "I will protect every one of my students. Remember your promise." Snape said in a low voice. Dumbledore continued, "The Ministry of Magic told me that Azkaban has been conquered, and they are powerless now. There might be a very powerful dark wizard controlling Azkaban, enslaving the Soul Eaters and Death Eaters there. Even Bellatrix died in his hands, and one of Voldemort's soul vessels fell into his hands. Voldemort has finally met his match this time. His soul vessels filled with dark magic have finally met someone who can break through its defenses and control his soul fragments. That's really a ruthless character." Snape said happily, and he even smiled for the first time in a long time. "But we also have to be vigilant. Voldemort will definitely return, and we have met a new opponent. This opponent is still very unfamiliar, and I still don't know too many things. But to be able to make a large number of Death Eaters betray Voldemort, just like you said, that person is really a ruthless character. Come with me to have a check. I hope Malfoy did not mess up too badly. Now tell me about Malfoy. I have been paying less and less attention to the school recently. Voldemort's matters have taken up too much of my energy. After all, I am only an old man. Malfoy revealed very little. I can only be sure that he is in contact with some very advanced dark magic, including controlling spirits, resurrecting the dead, creating mummies, and enslaving souls, even involving immortality. Just the things he revealed made me feel afraid. You should know that magic that involves the soul is very rare, and it is either powerful white magic or terrifying dark magic. His magic is getting stronger by the day. Now he is not inferior to some adult magi. Chapter 778. Autumn in Nivea Peninsula had started to turn gloomy and cold. There was almost no sunlight in this season, and the shorter and shorter days caused the place to feel dark and gloomy. Durmstrand Magic School was located here. It was located in the middle of the towering mountains and next to a lake that looked like clear water. The tall 4-story castle was not as tall as the Hogwarts Gothic buildings, but it was much more solid. The style of the castle in Lord of the Rings was closer to that of Chin Ang's taste. The gray granite walls were embedded in the rocks, giving off a heavy and reliable feeling. Durmstrand had a swift and fierce style of study. The students here wore gray leather robes and had green stubble on their heads. Even though it's a German-speaking magic school, it feels like a Russian. Chinong commented. Durmstrang was a magic school that taught black magic, and its headmaster was a convicted Death Eater. It was only because he had reached an agreement with Crouch, the former director of the Magic Law Enforcement Department, before he was sentenced, that he was able to escape with his life. Therefore, this person was also afraid of Voldemort. A former Death Eater, like him, could become the headmaster of Durmstrang. This showed how much this magic school indulged in this aspect. Chun-Ong liked this kind of indulgence. As the third Dark Devil, Durmstrand was undoubtedly the most suitable place to develop backup organizations and members. Perhaps Chin-Ong could already control Hogwarts, but it was a magic school after all, and not a military camp or government. Terrifying and oppressive measures were not suitable to be implemented there. Perhaps the students of Slytherin would welcome Morgatha's ruler, but Gryffindor would definitely be against it, and the other 2 academies would most likely resist passively. What could Chin-Ong do? Kill them all? Even Morgoth felt that it was too much. Furthermore, these students had their families, their social class, and their interests. This meant that most of the students of Hogwarts would not easily side with the dark magi. Things need to be done slowly, rather than forcefully controlling that place and using blood and terror to dominate Hogwarts. Why don't we wait for it to ferment on its own and change it from within? Seeds need soil and time to sprout. I've already planted 3 seeds there, and they will change everything. The Golden Sun Scripture and the Black Scripture of the Dead. This is the clash of fate. Harry Potter and Malfoy, Dracula, Dumbledore and Voldemort, and Snape, who hovers between the 2. Standing on the top of Durmstrand Castle, Chin-Ong looked down from a tower surrounded by huge glass windows. The students of Durmstrand Magic School were playing with each other in their leather hats and coats, full of joy and liveliness. The Death Eaters had already invited Igor Kakarov over for him. Following the sound of footsteps, Yaxley, a Death Eater who had just defected to Morgoth, carefully pushed open the door and entered. Behind him were 2 Death Eaters holding Igor Kakarov. He looked terrified and his legs were weak. The 2 Death Eaters had to support him from both sides to prevent him from being paralyzed on the ground. He was sweating profusely, and the small curly goatee that he had carefully maintained was stuck to his chin in a mess. Seeing Chin-Ong, his usually mellow, melodious, and passionate voice became frightened. He said with a trembling voice, "Spare me. I didn't mean to betray the Dark Devil King. That's just what the Ministry of Magic said to slander me. I've always been loyal to the Dark Devil King, controlling this magic school for him." Chin-Ong slowly turned around. Igor was a little surprised to see this strange Easterner, but he quickly came to his senses. It was normal for anyone to be Voldemort's follower. Could this person be a wizard from a Japanese pure-blood family? Yaxley was very clear about Chen Ang's identity and the difference between Chin-Ong and Morgoth. He lowered his head and said, "Sir Envoy, we've already taken control of the other professors. The dark wizards are very sensible." Sensible. Chinong smiled and said, "Of course the dark wizards know to yield to power. I hope the pure-blood families in Northern Europe can do the same. Have you taken control of the school board?" "I'm calling them over." Chinong looked at the battered Igor and said in a low voice, "You don't have to be so afraid of me, because I'm not the follower of the Dark Devil King that you're afraid of. I'm not Voldemort's follower. I'm the envoy of the new Dark Devil King, and Voldemort is already a dead dog. So they—" Chin-Ong pointed around and said, "have all sided with the new Dark Devil King. He has no entanglement with you, and doesn't care who you betrayed, because he's not the one you betrayed." Igor heaved a sigh of relief when he heard this. He knew that there was no way he could survive in front of Voldemort. The Black Devil could not tolerate anyone who betrayed him. But if it was the new Black Devil, things would be much easier to deal with. Igor smiled and said, "I'm willing to serve the Dark Devil King." Chun-Ong was quite satisfied with his adaptability. He laughed and said in a low voice, "You're very smart. Although you didn't betray the new Dark Devil King, he still has a group of Death Eaters under him who you tricked into Azkaban. Without his protection, you'll definitely die. Only under his protection can you avoid their vengeance. According to common sense, even if your betrayal has nothing to do with him, the Dark Devil King will still kill you to appease his betrayed and tortured subordinates. But you're very lucky, because the new Dark Devil King doesn't care what the former Death Eaters under him think. He only cares what they do. Those people fear him like a demon king. Similarly, he doesn't care what you think, but what you choose. Submit or die." Igor's body went limp, and he said timidly, "Submit. I want to control this magic school and practice the Dark Devil King's ideas. You'll still be the headmaster, but just do your job well. I want you to contact Hogwarts and initiate an exchange program for Durmstrang and Hogwarts to exchange teaching. You don't have to worry about the Nordic Ministry of Magic. They'll soon adapt. Someone from the British Ministry of Magic is also going to mediate, and you'll soon get permission to apply to Dumbledore for an exchange between the two schools. In the future, I'll be in charge of Durmstrang's daily teaching, and you'll be in charge of external communication and mediating. I'll give you advice on the key points." Chapter 779. Did you know? There's a new professor in our school. Really? But it's already been a few weeks since school started. Which class is it? I heard it's Black Magic class. Low murmurs could be heard in the corridors of Durmstrang Castle. Durmstrang was a school that taught black magic. However, even in Durmstrang, there was an unclear boundary to the black magic curriculum. Due to the most basic rationality, Durmstrang would not teach overly dangerous black magic. Some top-notch black magic was also a taboo in Durmstrang. But after Chenong came, it was not necessarily the case. Students of Durmstrang, dressed in brown leather robes, were rushing from the dormitory to the classroom. The black magic class taught by Chenong was a big class for the whole year. Regardless of the school, the whole year had to attend. They were also eager to know what the new black magic teacher was like. Chun-Ong stood in front of the wall where Gellert Grindelwald had left the symbol of the sacred relic of death. Because of the curse left by the first Dark Devil, the school had not eradicated it. And now that Igor Kakarov was the headmaster, it was hard to say if Durmstrang would remove the symbol. Looking at the elder symbol on the wall that represented the old wand, Chin-Ong could feel that there was indeed a trace of the power of the sacred relic of death here. But then again, even if the sacred relic of death was here, this kind of sacred relic that could break Harry Potter with a single stroke was not something that Chin-Ong cared about, let alone a mere symbol. This wall was hidden in a relatively remote corridor due to the school's dark magic class. It was not far from the classroom where Chin-Ang's black magic class was held. Therefore, when he saw that it was almost time for class, Chin-Ong turned around and walked out of the classroom. The black magic class was held in a dungeon because the black magic class in Durmstrang Magic Academy was also a dual class to a certain extent. In fact, the reason why this place was notorious among the 13 magic academies was because its second headmaster, Harfongmont, established the tradition of duels and combat magic for Durmstrand. That was why, even though all the magic schools had eliminated black magic, they still retained this controversial curriculum. The atmosphere in the dungeon was gloomy and terrifying. Some black magic items were placed on the shelves on both sides. When Chanong walked in, the classroom was completely silent. This was because his oriental face was very unfamiliar to the students. They instinctively kept silent. It was unknown whether it was because of Detzi's inflexibility, Russian's combat intuition, or simply the alertness and sensitivity of a small animal. These students might have sensed the deep and bone-chilling cold aura emanating from Chanong. You're here to learn magic. Chun Ang's good teacher, Professor Snape, made a brief opening speech. I don't care how you're waving your wand stupidly, and I don't want to listen to you suggesting that this is against the law, that this is too cruel, this kind of sissy opinion. For the rest of the lesson, I hope to hear, yes, Professor, or hurrah. I even loathe those so-called, according to personality ideals or any other messy things planned to assign students to academies. So, in my opinion, your academy doesn't exist. The only one that exists is the academy that I assign to you. You're all pure-blooded. So, according to tradition, the method of assigning academies here is bloodline. Chin Ong waved his wand lightly, changing everyone's school uniform, the Russian-style gray leather robes into pure white leather jackets. Then, 2 different glass vessels appeared on the table. One was a white glass traditional-style wine bottle, and the other was a brown glass short-mouthed bottle. Another curious student rushed to open the 2 bottles. A strong smell of alcohol assaulted their nostrils. The Russian speakers are Slavic. The German speakers are Germanic. Oh, and you Nordic people, but it doesn't matter. After all, Norway and Switzerland belong to the Germanic language family, while Bulgaria belongs to the Slavic language family. The general idea is correct. Chinong said as he waved his wand. Everyone present was divided into gray and blue. He nodded in satisfaction. That's how it should be. How can the Slavic gray animals mix together with the Germanic barbarians? Your civilization is different. There seemed to be students protesting, but Chen Ong did not hear them at all. Now, there are 2 drinks in front of you. Choose one and drink it all. Under Chen Ang's indifferent gaze, these careless students picked up one of the 2 drinks and sniffed it. Those reckless little rascals couldn't wait to finish it in one gulp. They had long smelled the aroma of alcohol that made their blood boil. Chin Ong even saw many Russian girls gulping down the 2 bottles without hesitation. As for those who weren't so reckless, after thinking for a while, they also chose to drink cup. Those who choose vodka are Slavic. Those who choose stout are Germanic. And those who drink both are Slavic. Once again, Chin Ong changed the color of their uniforms. The blue ones were the students who chose the Germanic option, and the gray ones were the students who chose the Slavic option. As he filtered through the choices one by one, based on the overall score, the pattern of the entire grade became clearer. Everyone was divided into 2 groups according to their temperament and nature. Only when the dividing line became clearer did Chanong stop, satisfied. He nodded and said, "That's more like it. What were you like when I first came in?" Unable to distinguish between Mao and Da? Since ancient times, Mao and have never coexisted. You are not allowed to pair up. Mao Xiong and Hans will never be together. What is black magic in your eyes? Chinong asked in a low voice. His voice was low, but it was loud enough to be heard clearly by everyone's ears. Is it power? Is it dominance? Is it glory? Is it hobbies? Is it ability? All of them, but not all of them. Black magic is the violent action of a person to carry out their will. It is everything that you have. It is undisguised violence, straightforward power, the simplest way to put your will into practice. I am not here to teach you how to wave your wand or answer your stupid and ignorant questions like how many syllables should be used to cast a spell. I am here to teach you how to carry out your will, how to place your will above everything else. You are here to learn from me how to control everything. You are here to learn from me how to be above everything, even death.